Remember, ladies and gentlemen, gentle souls, kind beings from across the 28 known galaxies, the first intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival is now open for submissions through December 1st. I look forward to seeing anything you can come up with, because, after all, isn't imagination what powers the universe? Well, I don't know what that means. Probably isn't. Physics is, gravity is, space-time and all that. But, imagination powers the sentient beings that live in the universe. Make a film. Try it. Enter. Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, and, of course, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I, once again, am robcasting at you Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Well, there's nothing I love more than being insulted by Star Trek fans on Twitter, which is fun. I get it all the time. And by the way, it's not like I'm not asking for it. I talk about Star Trek a lot, as those of you who are part of this channel know. All of you Imagination Connoisseurs for 2 years, almost. December will mark 2 years I've been doing this show. I've been ranting and raving about Star Trek most of my life, actually. Actually, in the earlier part of my life, there was less to rant about because I loved Star Trek so much, because there was only Star Trek that I loved. Except, as we know, I know, and the children shall lead. I get it. I know. Never going to love that. Never. I'm never going to love Deep Space Nine's Meridian either. Not going to love that. Night Terrors and Next Generation. Yeesh. Anyway, there's always something to hate in Star Trek, but for the most part, I love it overall. However, I have never had the kind of acrimonious relationship with Star Trek fans that I seem to have lately. And I get a lot of this. First of all, I am not a fan of meme wars. I mean, I like a good meme. I do, but what I don't like is, look, I'm cutting edge, kids. Like, I'm all over the internet all the time. I expect if you're gonna employ your meme foo, I want the best meme foo you can get. What I don't want is tired meme foo like this. When people send me this meme, first of all, I tune you out. I'm like, really? We have you have the greatest information technology machine or infrastructure ever built, and this is the meme that you throw at me? A Simpsons meme? And you're complaining that I'm mad about new Star Trek? I don't know. Really, it really just irks me. It irks me, and it makes me, want to tune out. And I expect people, if you're going to employ memes, use cutting-edge memes. Use memes that we've never seen before. Use memes that are new. Use memes that are, as Charles Napier would say, and the children shall lead, now. Use now memes. Old man yelling cloud, wow. There's something that really shows, as a Star Trek fan, you must do better. That's the kind of meme you would see at the Las Vegas comic Star Trek convention. There's a lot of old man yelling at cloud memes flying around the creation convention in Vegas, let me tell you. And I mean this lovingly. So use better memes, please. Anyway, so after my show yesterday about Star Trek Lower Decks, and basically my ongoing hatred of the last 11 years of Star Trek, because it's not good. It's not good science fiction, and it's not good Star Trek. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't like it. I don't expect everybody to like everything, especially the way I like things. Remember, I always talk about this show, about how we've lived through how you first... James Bond is a perfect example. Everybody has their favorite Bond, and usually it's the Bond that you first saw. That was your first experience with Bond. You kind of never forget it. And you usually like the Bond that you grew up with that you first saw. Well, that makes sense to me. And if you're a genre fan, if you're a science fiction, fantasy, and horror fan that's been growing up in this day and age, when you were a kid, when you were seeing things, those are the things that most ingrained this love of this material into you. And as I've pointed out, and look, I will cop to being an old man with one foot in his grave, because that's exactly what I am. But the way you've experienced these things has a lot to do with how you love them. And I have said on this show for the last 11 years, the Star Trek that we've been getting, the J.J. Abrams produced films, the Bad Robot movies, and now the Secret Hideout productions of Discovery, Picard, and now Lower Decks, and God knows whatever else they're going to do to flog a dead horse, that we're going to get is going to be the Star Trek that a lot of people saw for the first time. And I understand that. And the thing about new Star Trek is it has been created in a time where there's been so much material that's already been established. When I started watching Star Trek, there was no Star Wars. It didn't exist yet. So when I was a kid watching Star Trek, it was ingrained in me in a specific way. And then as I was growing up with Star Trek, there was only the original series, then there was the animated series, and then there was the motion picture. And then there was the classic films until 87 when Next Generation debuted. And what's interesting about that period of time, and for old school Star Trek fans, why that is important is because you watch this thing that you like, that you were attracted to, the original series, which there was only 79 episodes, 80 if you include The Cage. But The Cage, by the way, is not canonical as it exists. The Cage is only canonical within the context of the Menagerie Parts 1 and 2. Because The Cage was never aired as part of the original broadcasting of Star Trek. So, I mean, it exists, of course, but it was a rejected pilot. And for that very reason, The Cage, as it exists in its form of The Cage, was never broadcast on TV until 1988. So, anyway, that's just a thing. And by the way, none of that really matters when you talk about canonical Star Trek. I mean, it matters to me. But to a lot of people, it's like, well, what does it really matter? Whatever's in your head canon matters. And so that's another thing. For my love of Star Trek that began as a child, I got the animated series. Then I got the Franz Joseph Technical Manual and Blueprints. Then I got the photo novels. Then I got, when I was a kid, there was Spock Must Die and Spock Messiah. But then Pocket Books started releasing novels like Trek to Mad World and The Galactic Whirlpool and The Starless World. Even Kathleen Sky's Vulcan with Spock with a hot babe fighting off giant ants. I kid you not. Look up the original cover for Bantam's Star Trek novel Vulcan with an exclamation point by Kathleen Sky. Trek to Mad World. So all of these things were formative as far as my love of Star Trek went. And then you had things that came out like B. Joe Trimble's Star Trek Concordance and all that. The Starfleet Space Flight Chronology. And when Star Trek the Motion Picture came out, what it did, which was very different from any kind of genre pop culture up to that point, was Star Trek the Motion Picture allowed our characters to age. And it incorporated their aging into the story. Definitely part of the story. And that was carried forth in the rest of the classic Star Trek movies because the classic cast was getting older. And so by the time, you get to Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home in 1986, 20 years had passed by since the debut of the original series. And within Star Trek time, 20 years had passed, and you'd watch these characters age. And this was quite extraordinary. I mean, there were TV shows that ran a long time, so you got to watch people age. And, of course, soap operas. There's characters that have been on soap operas, actors for half a century. But in terms of science fiction action adventure show, it was pretty extraordinary, especially as a kid. These were my heroes. I mean, James T. Kirk was the man. He was the person I liked the most. And I watched him go from debonair young the youngest commander of a Federation starship ever, to my dad. He became my dad, during the time that Star Trek was on. Well, this was a very interesting thing. And I think that, so my fandom of Star Trek is, say, very different. And also, I took Star Trek very seriously as a kid. I got the album Inside Star Trek, which I think came out in 1976. So I listened Gene Roddenberry over and over again interview people and talk about the meaning of Star Trek. I listened to that record 1,000 times, like 1,000 times. So even Star Trek's creator was part of my youth, talking to me, even though it was on a record, of course, but spoken word. It wasn't like he was singing like Shatner and Nimoy. There was no ballad of Bilbo Baggins. But so all of that, and I took it very seriously. As I was growing up, I'm like, I aspired to live in the Star Trek universe. And during the time I was alive, I was watching the beginnings of the Star Trek universe manifest themselves in front of me. Computer technology. I remember when my neighbor across the street, Pete Chambers, got like an Apple II. It took us 6 hours to load up Soft Porn Adventure on a cassette tape. What are you going to do? Wow, it's a text game that's pornographic. Those were the heady days, my friends. We got Pong, we got Atari 2600, Intellivision, ColecoVision, Nintendo. I mean, I watched the development. The home computer, I got a Macintosh in 1988. I was working on Macintoshes when they were new at the Evergreen State College. They had got them in the computer center, watching the world slowly develop into a Star Trek world, the world that I thought that I was going to be living in. Everything was moving forward. Star Trek was moving forward. In 1987, The Next Generation came out. We leapt forward almost 100 years, 80 some odd years in the future. And Star Trek The Next Generation was very careful to establish its own thing. Yes, DeForest Kelley plays the Admiral. He's never... I mean, it was cheeky. Of course he was Dr. McCoy. We all knew that. But the references to original Star Trek were kept to a minimum by Gene Roddenberry himself and, of course, Rick Berman and the writers and producers on the show, because they were very interested to have Star Trek The Next Generation forge its own identity. We did see Sarek, Mark Leonard, coming back to play Sarek in Season 3. Now, what was amazing about that is, of course, Mark Leonard at the time was the first actor to play a Romulan, a Vulcan, and a Klingon, because he had played the Klingon commander of the Amar in Star Trek The Motion Picture, the Klingon battlecruiser at the beginning of Star Trek The Motion Picture. And Mark Leonard came back and played Sarek in Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 4, Star Trek 6. And then he came back and he played Sarek in Star Trek The Next Generation. So over those decades, there was a lineage of Star Trek. The design work, the actors, the same actors. Leonard Nimoy came back and played Spock in Unification Parts 1 and 2. James Doohan came back in Relics in Season 6 of Next Generation. George Takei came back and played Sulu in Star Trek Voyager. So for all of the time that I was growing up and moving from a small child to manhood and, well, let's face it, adulthood, am I here yet? You tell me. But so that was what Star Trek was. And Star Trek was constantly moving forward. And part of the appeal of Star Trek was this cohesive universe. Now, did it all work? Even the eugenics wars, was that World War III? And then when we get to The Next Generation, Encounter at Farpoint, the post-atomic horror. Wait a minute, have we ever really heard about that before? So yes, as Next Generation went on and more Star Trek stories were told, the continuity of Star Trek was played with, it was fast and loose. But for the most part, it fit together. And also, as I've talked about a lot on this show, one of the things that I used to love when I was a kid was the Best of Trek anthologies. And the Best of Trek anthologies were these books where there were essays written talking about the Star Trek universe. Real deep dives into what was there. And taking the Star Trek universe, the way they approached it is that the Star Trek universe was real. It was a real place, which meant it had to feel real, people's motivations and why things happened. Everything was analogous to the real world. You believed it. And as when pocketbooks took over, when Bantam lost the rights to publish Star Trek novels and things, and pocketbooks picked them up during the time of of Star Trek The Motion Picture, when Vonda McIntyre put out The Entropy Effect, there was a conscious effort made to write some really great science fiction stories that were also Star Trek stories. I mean, having Vonda McIntyre, I'd read her book Dream Snake, and I was excited that she wrote a Star Trek novel, and really interesting stuff was going on within the novels. And so as I was growing up, because there was only 79 episodes of Star Trek, then the 22 animated series episodes, and then, of course, we got Star Trek the Motion Picture, the movies. When I got a new Star Trek novel, especially the pocket books, they became canonical to me. I did not differentiate between Star Trek stories, and even the DC Comics stories. When DC Comics got the license, Marvel had the license for a while after Star Trek the Motion Picture, but they only had the rights to the motion picture, so they didn't have the rights to anything else. But they had stories about Dr. McCoy's daughter Joanna, and it was all part of this frothy, heady Star Trek mix that was pushing the universe forward. And the writers of the Star Trek novels were very intent on making the Star Trek universe bigger and explaining things in the Star Trek universe. So there was a lot going on, and everybody took there was the basic premise is that the Star Trek universe, all of these things had this idea that the Star Trek universe was a real place. And it was not necessarily, there was something that was going on that I never understood, that people tried to equate our own history with Star Trek history. And Greg Cox, who's a very good Star Trek novelist, when he wrote his stories about the eugenics wars and Khan Noonien Singh, he wrote a trilogy of books about Khan. He tried to write his books as if the eugenics wars were going on in our world today. And how come we didn't know about them? They were this clandestine things, which I never understood that impulse, because that sort of came in later. To me, it was obvious that Star Trek was not the 1960s in Star Trek was not our 1960s. It was an alternate history 1960s that was very close to our history, but not quite. Because when you had episodes like Tomorrow Is Yesterday, or you had Assignment Earth, for instance, when they go back in time to prevent, or they want to find out why nuclear apocalypse was averted, and you find out that Robert Lansing's character, Gary Seven, shows up from an alien race they didn't know anything about, but there was no nuclear weapons platform in orbit around. So this idea that they had to figure out why was there no eugenics wars in our day and age, that was weird to me. I never understood that. But again, that came way later. And then, of course, after the success of Next Generation, by season 3, they were cooking with gas. And then you had Deep Space Nine, you had Voyager, you had Enterprise. And as I explained yesterday, the idea of, and somebody pointed out that they looked up the idea of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. They said, I looked up that meme, and the meme was shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, not shirt sleeves to shirt tails. Well, look, as it was explained to me by Mike Bodden, it was shirt sleeves to shirt tails, and I kind of like that idea, moving downward on a shirt. So I'm going to go with shirt sleeves to shirt tails. And the idea that the Gene Roddenberry era was, obviously, you roll up your sleeves and you make Star Trek work, which they did. And they were fighting against overwhelming odds. Ratings, Star Trek was going to get canceled. The fans wrote in, saved it for its 3rd season. And then you had literally the next generation of people. You had the Nicholas Meyers, and then I would say the Harv Bennett era of Star Trek, which gave way to the Next Generation era of Star Trek. So Gene Roddenberry came back. And I would say that even the Harv Bennett era of Star Trek, they were trying to preserve. So everybody was preserving what went on. So you had the Next Generation. So if you have a family business, and Roddenberry is the patriarch of the family, what went on from after 1979, but beginning after the Star Trek the Motion Picture, and all the way through the end of 2005 with Star Trek Enterprise, it was still the family that is trying to live up to what the patriarch had started. So that was the shirt sleeves went to the rest of the shirt. And then that was the end of an era. And so when Bad Robot took over in 2007, what they wanted to do, this idea of rebooting Star Trek, redoing Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, going back to like the core values of Star Trek, to me was a huge mistake. Because what it did was it never allowed Bad Robot, and they had a really interesting, like, how can we tell stories about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy? Let's create an alternate universe. And maybe that could have worked but then they had to bring the real Leonard Nimoy in and the Kelvin universe, but then they tried to change the fundamental nature of the characters of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy and turn them into characters they saw as being more palatable to movie-going audiences. But the problem with that was those characters weren't really Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. You're reinventing them, but they never nailed those. Carl Urban's doing an incredible impersonation of DeForest Kelley, and I love Chris Pine as an actor. I think he's a very talented actor. He looks the part, but he's basically playing Maverick from Top Gun, but written even more dumb than Maverick was. And so then you have the last 11 years of Star Trek, where Star Trek Discovery is supposed to be a prequel, but they've made no effort after Brian Fuller was deposed, because none of the powers that be understood that Star Trek shows are incredibly expensive to get up and running, because it's so front-loaded, because you have to build everything, and that's why it's so damn expensive, and they freaked out. As Brian Fuller himself told me, Les Moonves thought that, well, can't you just do new Star Trek like the original, where you can do it on the cheap? Well, no less, you have to build everything up front and then amortize the costs over the course of the series. Each episode has sets and costume construction fees built into them, so you spend it all up front, and then you catch up, and then by the end of the season is when your budget is even Steven. That's what Rick Berman was able to do. Never went over his budget, because he would save things with bottle shows. But anyway, to me, the last 11 years of Star Trek has been rather unsuccessful, because for the most part, they've been trying to turn Star Trek into something else. But I also recognize that there's people that have come to Star Trek for the first time watching these movies and shows, and then there's also Star Trek fans that are, let's just say, less discerning than I am, because some of them have the experience, but also they didn't take it as seriously as I did growing up, which I recognize. So their experience of Star Trek was different than mine. Well, anyway, so after my rant about Star Trek Discovery, I like it when people take me to task. I love nothing better than having a great conversation about Star Trek. It's one of my favorite things. I've been talking about it my whole life. I don't see that my life will change. I don't think I'm going to stop talking about Star Trek anytime soon. But there was a couple of things that people sent me, diametrically opposed things, that I wanted to share and analyze with y'all. I'm having a nice cup of joe, by the way. Probably not too smart, because it's diuretic. I'm supposed to be on this show for a long time. Let me strap on the glasses. And the first thing, look, it's always nice to find fans, and we all love, whether we're talking politics or we're talking about ceramics or we're talking about car engines, we always like to find people on the internet that share our points of view. Now, I make it a point to seek out alternate points of view, opposite points of view, opposing points of view, because I don't learn much. If I read people that have my same point of view. My views are not challenged. So I like reading, whether it's politics, people's politics. I mean, it's funny. I've been taken to task a lot by people that don't understand why I've gone on other channels, other genre channels or movie pundit channels, where the people on those channels seem to have very different politics than I do. Even the Prisoner show that I'm doing, Az and I, heel versus babyface. I love Az. He's got a keen mind, as David Warner said in Chain of Command Part 2. But I don't think he and I see eye to eye on every political issue at all. But we certainly can have very great discussions, deep dive discussions. I've never once felt that I've had anything but very rewarding conversations with Az, and I really love doing shows with him, and I hope to do shows with him for a long time. Just like I do like appearing on Gary Beekler's show. I like Nerdrotic. I really like the guys and girls over at Midnight's Edge. They have all been nothing but nice to me. And while we don't always have to agree on politics, we certainly can agree that we're all fans, and we can understand, we can have passionate, interesting conversations about what we love. And even if we disagree politically or disagree about even Star Trek or things imagination connoisseur related, we have very interesting, fun, respectful conversations. As I said, Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers asked me to go on his show, and I don't think there's a person that's more diametrically opposed. We're from such opposite ends of the political spectrum, but Jeremy was nothing but nice, respectful. We had a great conversation. We shared our love and passion for all of this material, And that certainly our politics, or whatever we personally believe, that also informs our discussion about the genre, did not get in the way of sharing our enthusiasm for science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and our imagination connoisseur pursuits. Now, I find that interesting because sometimes people that I would think are on my side of the aisle are not nearly as accepting, which, I find that fascinating. But anyway, so let me start with an article. Actually, it's Ed Whitfield sent this to me and on Twitter, and I would like to share this with you. He wrote this: Critics Log, Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of relished reading this. Star Trek Lower Decks isn't a Star Trek series in any meaningful sense, but it purports to be, so let's give creator Mike McMahon, whose chubby, bespectacled appearance suggests he was grown in a lab from the distillate of clueless geekdom, that which is undeserved, the legitimacy of a review. Unlike the show in question, it won't be breezy, and it will resist talking about Star Trek in a wearisome meta way, instead concentrating on what made the old franchise viable as a long-term proposition. The fans who made this self-indulgent fanfic know they love Star Trek. But Lower Decks proves the old adage that to love is not to understand, or indeed to recognize the awesome responsibility that comes with expanding the franchise. If, like me, you were a teenager when The Next Generation became a pop culture staple and touchstone for your fandom, you probably discussed with friends with adolescent glibness many joke scenarios featuring your favorite characters, in which incongruity, them exhibiting contemporaneous attitudes, manifesting incompetence, acting contrary to the franchise's values, upsetting its tone, and possessing the same knowledge as the audience, was the joke. Wouldn't it be funny, before it actually happened and was not funny, if Data said, shit? Imagine if Picard spent an episode mesmerized by Troy's tits. Suppose Wesley fucked up for once, made the wrong calculation, and a ship of space nuns, exploded. Could Geordi be using that visor to see through people's clothes? Suppose Beverly brought a virus aboard that made everyone perform show tunes. What if Riker had a venereal disease that produced a pheromone that aroused Worf? What if the Enterprise computer broke down and the ship had to run on an antique copy of Windows 95? Easy playground laughs for those familiar with the characters and the conventions of their self-serious universe, you might think. But simple though those jokes would have been, no Trekkie of the period would ever have imagined that one day the same approach would be used to script a real series, albeit an animated one, reveling in its license to be more heightened and less dramatic, made under the Star Trek banner. For one thing, as any savvy 13-year-old from the early 90s would have told you, what raises a few chuckles amongst your wayward pals as you while away the time you're supposed to be learning to use algebra would kill a real show. The concept of a Star Trek sitcom, though problematic, wouldn't necessarily destroy the integrity and fidelity of the universe in which it was set. The humor could be carefully mined from the outre situations junior characters might find themselves in, their adventures suitably inconsequential enough, maybe C stories skipping the B category altogether, as not to intrude or undermine the serious moral questions and dramatic stakes of the A stories that usually propel a Trek series. But the writing would have to be deft, witty, and take care not to mock the suspension of disbelief required to make Star Trek work. Tragically, Lower Decks, from its derivative name down, takes the opposite approach. What we have here is a group of self-congratulating but not especially bright Trekkies building a show around the kind of playground conceits shat out above. These inanities are dressed up using the iconography of real Star Trek, and each episode is stuffed with callbacks to previous series, a passive-aggressive means of affirming the show's in-universe credentials, while simultaneously, by appropriating the audience's detailed knowledge of said universe, destroying its integrity. McMahon's shallow hacks, whose reverence for Trek resembles James Cameron's respect for the Titanic when he landed his submersible on the wreck and broke it, delights in giving us Beckett Mariner, the insubordinate ensign and daughter to the ship's captain. Obnoxiously rebellious, the serial rule breaker who talks like a 21st century teenager and doesn't give a fuck, man. The question of how such a person, lacking all focus or discipline, could become an officer aside, even comic rebels have to get serious to be commissioned, a sop to credibility in the end, see Bill Murray in Stripes. She's an affront not just to the stock currency of Starfleet characters, namely competence, but to the universe that demands it. She's the vessel via which the professionalism and curiosity of the senior characters is mocked. Looking at the Star Trek universe through this lens warps it and belittles it. The series finale, no small parts, doubles down and suggests Mariner's disdain for protocol and ability to think like a cavalier, irresponsible idiot is an asset, one that will give her captain an edge. Did Mike McMahon jot that idea down as a 15-year-old between fits of masturbation? It took another wanker, Alex Kurtzman, to commission it. The other lower deckers are, in no particular order, Boimler, an officious and earnest bag of nerves, whose principal function is to contrast with Mariner's free-spirited, no-fucks-given attitude, Tendi, an impish, smiley, perma-optimistic irritant, and Rutherford, an engineer who represents the fans who love Trek's technology and its attendant technobabble. You might think that doesn't read like a lot of comic potential, and you'd be right. What we're left with are 10 episodes of compressed, hyperactive Trek self-parodies that range from loud and unwatchable to lighthearted and inconsequential. If you're minded to see it as a sideshow, an irrelevant if lacking the wit to be irreverent send-up of all the elements that make Star Trek's world a place you'd want to occupy, surrounded by people who encourage you to be the best version of yourself, then it's a colorful distraction. If nothing matters, who cares if Q makes an appearance, or Riker and Troy join the fray as one-note reprises of their live-action counterparts? But if McMahon, as his retinue, I don't know that word, I have to look that up. I'm missing that, sorry, I apologize. Of frivolous bullshit artists dare to dream this show can coexist canonically with its predecessors, then Lower Decks is yet another disastrous successor to the franchise of old. A show this stupid can't be Star Trek, and characters this zany, scatty, and superficial have no place in it. In short, McMahon's made a Trek apparently scripted by fans with an approach most likely to appeal to those who never accepted the show's dramatic credentials, so didn't respect the originals. Why anyone who cared about Gene Roddenberry's legacy would commission such a show is a mystery Data's Sherlock Holmes couldn't solve. Don't mince words. What do you really think? Yeah, and I'll tell you, man, that's harsh. That's harsh. But I'm going to admit when Ed Whitfield tweeted this article to me and said, you and I, basically he was saying you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. He was right. Now, obviously, this gets a little personal, and it gets really personal, and I understand that. It mocks the creators of the show. But then again, the creators, I mean, Mike McMahon, in all fairness, is clearly a Star Trek fan. But as I explained yesterday, he's the kind of Star Trek fan that exists on the outside. He loves Star Trek, like so many people do, but they like Star Trek from afar. You know, they don't take the universe like when I was a kid. I took it way seriously, and maybe that's my problem. You know, the real question I have for myself is, well, am I wrong? Is my serious nature the reason I've loved Star Trek my whole life? Has that become some kind of a, I don't know, an albatross around my neck? Is it a liability? Is my fandom, am I supposed to have outgrown the way that I am a Star Trek fan to appeal to more modern audiences? I don't know. My problem with that is that I think modern audiences are less holistic in their even knowledge of the genre. People read less. You know, I find before, when you would go to a Star Trek convention, most of the people when I was younger, when I was 12 years old, going to Star Trek conventions, everybody was just as well versed in the great canon of science fiction works. Like, people were talking, they could make references to Stranger in a Strange Land or Dune or the Foundation trilogy, Imperial Earth, you know, and you could talk about all those things, and it was just expected that Star Trek fans also were they were members of the science fiction book club, and they were very literary minded, and the people that were thinking about Star Trek and writing about Star Trek, like in the Best of Trek anthologies, had literary backgrounds as well, and so they understood the science fiction genre. Well, what's interesting now in our sort of postmodern culture, is it possible to write a serious Star Trek show that is not somehow self-reflexive? That's another problem that I have ever since Star Trek '09. I haven't seen any Star Trek that has been set in a universe unto itself. It's all wink, wink, nudge, nudge. There's been no original Star Trek created. It's all been made from the outside of the universe. It's never been made from the inside of the universe. And I hope people understand what I mean by that. It's all self-reflexive. It's all made for people. It's Captain Kirk and the Kobayashi Maru scenario in Star Trek '09 is so ridiculous because it's making a joke, and we're supposed to wink and nudge at it. It didn't try and make what Kirk did, as described in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. The way he beat the no-win scenario, it was turned into a joke in Star Trek '09. It was not. They didn't write a scene that actually showed how within the Star Trek universe itself did Kirk beat the Kobayashi Maru scenario. As it was given to us in Star Trek '09, the audience, we all knowingly had seen Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. So we understood what this whole Kobayashi Maru thing was, and it was played as a joke. A fourth wall breaking joke for the audience. That was the entire Kobayashi Maru scene. That didn't work as a Star Trek scene. It only worked as a knowing reference. It might as well have been a Star Trek skit on Saturday Night Live. It certainly didn't work in the Star Trek universe. It was being played to us as an audience the same way that Chekhov's portrayal was, by making the computer not understand his thick Russian accent. Rather than create a character, you hire an actor who's actually Russian, who speaks Russian for real. You saddle him with a ridiculous accent that was created by an actor. We all laugh at it, but they turn it into a fourth wall breaking joke when the ship's computer can't recognize his thick Russian accent, even though, he's already driving the ship. He's the helmsman already. And so we, as an audience, we laugh, but it breaks the fourth wall. You're no longer playing in the Star Trek universe. Let's bring Spock and have him smile because, hey, he smiled in the cage. Not because there's any in-universe reason. Oh, let's give him one. Let's saddle him with the learning disability. None modern. And the reason I don't like modern Star Trek is, Lower Decks. All Lower Decks is a fourth wall breaking. I'm outside of the Star Trek universe. It's all winking and knowing to the fans. It really is all fan service. It's not a real show. It's not even. Sure, they've got these stories, but as far as Star Trek, I can't. If it's canonical, I don't believe that show. I don't believe it for a second. But anyway, that's just me. Maybe because I'm a different kind of a fan. Because I grew up literally with Star Trek when it was perceived as a different kind of a thing. Even Enterprise, whether it was successful or not, Enterprise, the only time it really ever broke the fourth wall and it didn't really work at all was the last episode of the show, where once again, Jonathan Frakes and Maria Sirtis come back and they're watching as their next generation selves are watching holodeck recreations of the Enterprise from Enterprise, the NX-01. Suddenly you've broken a fourth wall by allowing the audience to have some knowing wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And you've thrown the entirety of all of Enterprise into question. Was it all just a holodeck show that Deanna Troi and Riker were watching? And that's why people hated that finale. It was a complete disservice to the 4 years of Enterprise. All the actors that were on that show, it was a real slap in the face, actually. But now, does any of that matter? In the grand scheme of things, when we have a raging pandemic and the cases are going up, does any of this matter? Probably not, but these are shows where we're discussing what, look, reading and watching movies and collecting stuff, this is all a privilege. If you're not worried about where your next meal is coming from and you're not worrying about where you're going to lay your head, everything is a luxury. Everything is a privilege. And I knock on wood at least in my imagination, every day that I can wake up into an environment where I can come into the Robservatory with all of this stuff that people would tend to look at, I think, 500 years ago and say, what is all this frivolous shit that you have surrounded? What is these plastic representation? What? Why do you have these action figures? So I recognize the whole idea to even talk about Star Trek in this way is an incredible privilege. You know, everybody talks about, there's a lot of talk about white male privilege. Well, you know what? There's great privilege to be a human being alive in the 2020s. I know it might seem insane, but all of us are living through the best time of human existence ever. Despite everything that's going on, there's more equality between people. There's less war. There's less famine. There's less pestilence, even during a global pandemic, than there has ever been. It is a wonderful, wonderful privilege, and I recognize that my whole life is a privilege. I'm privileged to live in the United States. I'm privileged to breathe the kind of air I'm breathing, believe it or not, even though I live in Los Angeles. It is a great privilege to be talking to you about things like Star Trek. We live in privileged times, all of us. Now, that's not to say there aren't many problems. But anyway, so I read Ed's article, his blog posting, and I could smile knowingly. But then I was contacted by Sean Pullen on Twitter. Now, Sean Pullen, somebody I know, go back and forth, he wrote to me. And he wrote the flip side. And I by the way, I did contact Sean, and I asked him if it was okay if I read these communications on the air, because I don't think it's fair to read if somebody sends you a DM or something. You can't just, I don't think it's right to put their stuff on the air, even if they write something that's defamatory to you. I mean, I guess you can, but I've always felt that you got to ask somebody. So I did ask Sean if I could read this, because I thought it was valid as well. He writes, "Hello, Rob. It's been months since I've written in. When COVID first struck, I was off work for a while, and I was able to tune into your channel and write a few letters. You were kind enough to read and engage with my pro-Star Trek Picard views, and your show helped me pass long hours at home. Thank you. I wish I had that luxury of time now, because Discovery is premiering next week, and I'd love to go back and forth with you again through its season. You're welcome to. Alas, I'm back to work and doubt I'll have the time. But I did want to respond to some of your tweets. You see, yesterday I was scrolling through the comments posted in reply to Mike McMahon's Lower Decks tweet. The thread was full of Trekkies positively glowing about the episode and showering Mike with gratitude and praise. But there was this one discordant rant of a reply from the notorious RMB. To be honest, it was a little jarring. I will say you are as welcome to your views as any Trekkie, and I have no time for those who responded to your comments by questioning your character and motivations. This is what I don't understand. Like, when I'm tweeting about Star Trek, I'm talking about addressing things that happen in the episodes themselves. Yeah, I do call into question the writers who are creating those things. But whenever I'm talking to modern Star Trek fans and I have a dissenting opinion, they immediately resort to personal attacks or finding things in my past and throwing them in my face. And I'm like, that's not an argument. The question remains, let's talk about the Star Trek episode and the points that I've brought up. Just because you don't like my point of view, you're not going to stay on point. But anyway, I appreciate Sean for recognizing that. I have no time for those who responded to your comments by questioning your character and motives. If they actually watched your channel, they'd know that not only do you love Star Trek and want to see it prosper done rightly, but also that you welcome civil discourse on the merits of modern Trek and provide a platform for voices and opinions that dissent from your own. I know, right? You'd think that, hey, why you're yelling at me and then you're being personal when you could just come on the show. So let's get to those tweets of yours, shall we? Wow, they were doozies. You started off by responding, and I was directly responding to Mike McMahon, directly to him on Twitter. I said about the finale of Lower Decks. I said, you started off by responding, so just how many people did you, Mike and company, kill in that episode? An entire starship crew lost, the mentally deficient Packlids vilified to the point of justifying their extermination, an exocomp turned into a coward. Seriously, Mike, perhaps a TNG rewatch is in order. I was using various, obviously, harsh, but I think a legitimate question to ask the creators of Star Trek. And you know what? If it's not legit, they should be asking these questions themselves. So clearly they're not, so why not me? I'll get to your comments about lives lost later because you expanded on your concerns in a subsequent tweet. Let's start with the Packlids. You said mentally deficient Packlids were vilified to the point of justifying their extermination. I take issue with so much of that take. First, you seem to be implying that there's something inherently wrong with presenting the intellectually inferior as villainous. I think there is something intellectually wrong with I think there is something inherently wrong, but okay. I'd point out it was TNG that first presented them so, but let's get into it. To suggest people of deficient intellect are incapable of villainy is limiting and offensive. I didn't say that. I was speaking about the Packlids specifically. To suggest people aren't culpable for villainy because they're mentally deficient is closer to the truth, but also limiting. Are the Packlids capable of discerning right from wrong? If so, they're villains, regardless of their intelligence. Is there anything in either TNG or Lower Decks to suggest they're not capable of such discernment? Moreover, what standards are you applying for classifying the Packlids as mentally deficient? There is such a thing as multiple intelligences. Just because the Packlids are mentally deficient in some areas doesn't mean they are mentally deficient in all areas. They're obviously capable of operating and maintaining warp-capable vessels, of integrating diverse alien technology, of combat strategy, of conceiving, laying, and springing traps on sophisticated organizations like Starfleet. Okay. Let me answer that. All of that is true, but that's not Star Trek per se. As I've talked about so many times, Star Trek, at least in the classic sense, didn't have villains. It had antagonists. And one of the great things, I think one of the enduring things about Star Trek is when there were people from opposing sides that we would, I guess you could call villains, for instance, like when we meet our first Klingon. John Colicos playing Kor in Errand of Mercy during the first season. We are shown the Klingons as being our adversaries, but they weren't just villainous adversaries who roll up on you and start shooting at your ships and killing people. They were smart. They were cunning. They were, in a way, elegant. They had senses of humor. The relationship, Kirk in his Barona disguise, he develops a relationship with Kor, and Kor admires him. So what you're doing is you're humanizing and you are showing the other side. So it's not just a villain that shows up and starts blowing shit up. You know, I mean, that can be true, but that's not really Star Trek. And when you're telling a story in the context of an animated series, and yeah, it's wacky fun, but when you're killing people within the context of an animated show, killing people en masse, I think it's problematic from a tonal standpoint. What lessons, what Star Trekian lessons are you supposed to take away from all of this? And the idea of the Packlids, a civilization that really can't think for themselves, they don't have much intellect. So what they've done is they steal from other people because they can't make things on their own. Well, what they apparently have done in this show, they've suddenly the Packlids have stolen incredible technology from races all over the place. I mean, how they were able to do that, we're not supposed to know or question. I question it. And I'm like, the thing about the Packlids, when I say they're mentally deficient, I don't mean they're like, let's use the word retards. I don't mean that. You know, now watch people triggered. Oh, I can't believe you use that word. But I'm just saying that the Packlids were a civilization that did not develop. They had to take other people's technology because they themselves were deficient in some way where they didn't, their own intellect. And yeah, they have, rather than develop their own technology, they steal others. And I get that. But you know, what would have been really interesting, especially for a show that's about contacting alien races, wouldn't it have been interesting, like, instead of doing a show where you have to set up a scene where they're carving up starships and literally hand-to-hand combat, the poor Packlids, and I'll say poor Packlids, they vilify them by turning them into these bloodthirsty, murdering, without a care in the world about life. I mean, you could have done a really interesting Star Trek story where maybe the Packlids could have learned something. You know, it was the finale of a show that's literally about second contact. Well, here's a race that you could have done something where they actually learned. And maybe in Star Trek fashion, maybe the Pakleds were shown the error of their ways, and maybe they could have evolved. I mean, that's only because that's what sort of Star Trek stories are about. But anyway, secondly, you use the word extermination. The Pakleds weren't exterminated. One of their ships was destroyed. Since when is destroying a solitary ship extermination? Moreover, it wasn't the Cerritos' crew's intention to destroy the Pakled ship, just disable it. The Pakled ship, it was Badgley who escalated crippling to destruction. But I'll go a step further. If the Cerritos crew were responsible for the Pakled's destruction, they weren't. Are they not justified in defending themselves? They saw the wreckage of their sister ship. They knew the Pakleds had murderous intent. Their ship was actively being carved up and boarded by armed Pakleds who seemed bent on killing, not capturing. Was the Cerritos crew supposed to lay down their lives because the Pakleds are mentally inferior? If a pit bull is savaging a child, do you not risk harming it in an attempt to stop it because the dog doesn't know any better, because it thinks it's just defending its turf? If Captain Picard were about to lose his ship and the lives under his care to Pakleds bent on pillage and destruction, would he have not been justified in sanctioning his crew to defend themselves? All of that is correct. All of that is absolutely correct. The question that I have for you is, does it belong in a Star Trek story? Are you telling an effective Star Trek story? I mean, when we've seen, and people kept throwing up, well, what about when the Yamato was destroyed in Contagion? Or what about when the Odyssey was destroyed by a Jemadar ship ramming it in the Jemadar in the second season of Deep Space Nine? Look, I understand starships blow up. People have lost their lives before. But what I'm interested in is the context and the intent of what's going on. You know, Lower Decks is kind of a mirth-filled story that's supposed to put humor, and you're supposed to enjoy it, and maybe it's a family show for Star Trek. But even if you're working in the context of a Star Trek show, how we deal with our adversaries is important. What is the message that's coming across? And why tell this kind of a story? I mean, it seemed to me that there was a lot of people killed. Like, people would be like, "Rob, well, what does it matter? It's an animated show. Who cares?" It matters because it's Star Trek. What is the idea behind a Star Trek episode? Why are we watching Star Trek? What does it mean to us? What are we saying about one another within Star Trek stories? I mean, ultimately, Star Trek was always an aspirational show that hopefully the audience was a little better off after they watched it than before. This film, or this episode, used that kind of wanton destruction and loss of life basically for a laugh. And at the end of the episode, did anybody mourn for the loss of the Federation starship at the beginning? Was there a moment where our captain, who knew her, was alone? Perhaps, I mean, we had one of our crew was lost, so okay, let's go to his funeral. But what about the loss of life? I mean, Star Trek never destroyed starships without some kind of remorse. You felt, look at the Doomsday Machine. It's horrifying what happened to the crew of the Constellation. I mean, Matt Decker, look what it drove him insane. It drove him crazy. You know, whether Ron Tracy in the Omega Glory, the Defiant in Tholian Web, what the M5 did to 4 starships in The Ultimate Computer. The loss of a starship was always horrifying. It always resonated. You felt it in the episodes. But in the final episode of Lower Decks, all is forgotten when, hey, the Titan shows up with Riker. And yeah, that's cool. I like that too. I like the fact that the Titan is now apparently canonical. We'd only had it in a book. Now it's real. Sean Tarangio, you go. Good for you. I think it's cool that, you know, Eagle Moss has already made a Titan. I'm sure they're going to have to do a second run of Titans, so because people are going to buy them now that it's the only, right now, Lower Decks swag you can buy. You can actually get Riker's ship now from Eagle Moss. Go pick it up. Oh, and here's another thing. Sean goes on to say, let's turn to the exocomp. You criticized McMahon for depicting a cowardly exocomp. That response blew my mind. Let me explain. When I saw the exocomp character painted in science blues, I thought, yes, finally something that Rob's going to enjoy and praise. I've watched your channel long enough to witness you speak frequently and repeatedly about your disappointment that modern Trek had yet to incorporate non-humanoid crew members in Starfleet. You've often spoken of crewman Nerat, the Horta officer created by author Diane Duane. You've bemoaned Discovery for not including such characters. Then when Lower Decks finally includes one, you don't offer so much as a crumb of commendation. Instead, you post a negative tweet about the exocomp being a coward. So you don't just want non-humanoid species in Starfleet, you want them also to be without character flaws? It's hard not to feel like you'll never be happy. Yo, Sean, that isn't true at all. Putting an exocomp in the role of where it was great. Great callback to Next Generation. I love the fact that an exocomp, it's exactly what I want for a Horta being a member of Starfleet. But if you've gone through Starfleet and you're a Starfleet officer, and there's a scene where the ship is in danger, and you take this non-alien crew member for the first time, something I really, really liked. I loved it there. And what does this crew member say? Oh, I'm not going to do my job. I'm a coward, and I just joined Starfleet to piss off my father. I'm like, you know what? Fuck you. Fuck you, McMahon. I mean, you do that, you take an exocomp, and then you turn this heady, cool thing that I would have loved, and then you turn around and say, nope, I'm just trying to piss off my dad. Well, you know what would have been really Star Trekian is if that exocomp, went in and saved the day, and maybe the exocomp was destroyed. I mean, then I would have been, okay, that's heroic and it's sad, and we might have had the crew feel some remorse. But this thing that I wanted to see, and then they turn it into a joke. They turn it into something that was not worthy of Star Trek. I mean, it really bothered me. And I know, why should it bother you? Because, why shouldn't it, Rob, it's an animated show. Why should you care? Because what I care about is, what does it say about the current state of Star Trek? It says that you have this really cool idea, the idea of an exocomp from Next Generation showing up, AI, especially the way AI, I mean, I don't know what the problem with modern Star Trek is, but talk about prejudicial. They talk about all their inclusion. They certainly don't like artificial life. I mean, it is the most racially prejudiced show against artificial life that I've ever seen. Can you imagine if you had, say, a character of color or a character of any kind, a Starfleet officer saying, you know what, I'm not going to go save the ship. I'm a coward, or I'm in Starfleet just because I wanted to piss off my father. They did that to the exocomp. I mean, talk about. I mean, you might as well say that exocomp came. Maybe the exocomp, like what I've heard, it was like Watto and Phantom Menace, or maybe a deadbeat dad for whatever reason. I mean, why do you have to do that? And again, when I'm watching it, my experience of Star Trek, I'm really excited that an exocomp is part of the look. Peanut Hamper, they gave it. This is the name I came up with. Peanut Hamper. That's the most puerile, stupid joke in the world. But I'll go with that. But you took this really cool science fiction Star Trekian concept, and you basically said, "Fuck you." Turn it into a joke, and at the end, our exocomp is spinning beep, 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 help, 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 and all we're supposed to go is like, ha, 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 ha. But you know what? If that's what they're turning the great Star Trek science fiction concepts into, I feel like it's problematic for our entire civilization, because is anyone going to be able to tell, like, are they even able to tell a real Star Trek story anymore? Because as Ed said in his essay about Star Trek Lower Decks, we're now, what you're doing is you're destroying. No one's ever going to be able to take Star Trek seriously. It all comes into parody, self-knowing, It just, I don't like it, because you can no longer tell a serious Star Trek story. They're undermining every time what they would do, what would be done reverentially or done aspirationally in classic Star Trek. Lower Decks never ceases to take the other direction. And they did that with the exocomp. And it's not that I'm not happy. I found that literally offensive. As somebody who is a science fiction fan was able to see, like, what a cool callback to bring an exocomp on and show why an exocomp, which that alone was kind of absurd that they brought the exocomp back. But what do? They tell you that, can't have exocomps in Starfleet. Can't trust them. Fuck those AIs. I mean, I hated that shit. I hated that shit because what it does is it diminishes now. Is anyone going to trust the exocomps again? Poor exocomps. I just went through all of Starfleet Academy to piss off my father. Anyway, and I know it seems so frivolous and stupid that I'm even saying this, but that's why I get angry, because I take it seriously. And they have an opportunity to do something really interesting with the character, but nope. Let's just play it off as a joke and leave that character stranded, floating through the cosmos at the end, because who cares? Riker and Troy show up on the Titan. Let me continue. There's almost a part of me that thinks maybe Mike McMahon tunes into your channel occasionally. Maybe he's an imagination connoisseur. Maybe he's a member of the Post-Geek Singularity. Well, if he is, he should fucking do better. He should do better. Maybe he agreed with and liked your idea of non-humanoid crew members and realized it was rife for humor. Yes, but you know what he did? He did it at the character's expense. And Star Trek never did that. You know, Star Trek never, ever denigrated a character. Whether it was an alien character or whether, you know, you can have people that are, there are like the aliens from fluidic space. I mean, there's not a lot of sympathy for them, but here was an opportunity to tell a really interesting story, an allegorical story about how artificial life, especially in light of what we've been given in Discovery and Picard, you know, if they already didn't show a disdain and hatred for artificial life or AI, you know, why not? Lower Decks comes along, and why not show why show an AI doing something good when we can just continue the tradition of showing AI being bad? But anyway, maybe he agreed with and liked your idea of non-humanoid crew members and realized it was rife for humor. Heck, we don't always consider the details. Peanut Hamper has no hands with which to pick up items, as would be the case with Narat. How does a non-humanoid function on a ship designed for humanoids? Well, I don't know. Why don't you show us something interesting how that would work? You know, they've shown us that before. How does a Horta use a toilet? Does a Horta use a toilet? And you know what? If you want to do humor like that, that's the kind of humor that would be interesting because it's character-based. If a Horta does have to go to the bathroom, how does a Horta go to the bathroom? I mean, for instance, as a silicon life form, maybe when a Horta defecates, it's useful. Or maybe what's interesting is that the transporter can use that matter. You know, I've always thought that wouldn't it be interesting to see the reason there's no toilets on the Enterprise? I mean, we've never really seen them, but it's because they used a version of transporter technology to beam bodily waste out of your body. You know, you can literally, if you really have to go to the bathroom in a tense battle situation, there is a transporter technology that can literally beam out your body waste if you need to. So in my imaginary world where Mike is an imagination connoisseur, I picture him giddily anticipating your joy at finally seeing a non-humanoid crew member on a Trek TV show. But look how it was treated. Look how that exocomp was treated. And, well, instead of posting a positive tweet celebrating the inclusion of your long-championed non-humanoid crew member, you complain and you crap all over it because the exocomp proves cowardly. Yes, because what you're doing is you're undercutting the very idea of something from another species. You have to show in Star Trek fashion, how does some species that is so different from a humanoid, how does that species add to the tapestry of our Star Trek crew? That's what Star Trek does best. You know, it shows the Hortas portrayed as a murderous creature. You find out the Horta is the last of her race, protecting her own young. And what was once monstrous, the Horta being able to burrow through solid rock, suddenly becomes useful. They turn the Horta's very nature into they're the ultimate miners, allowing the people on Janus 6 to do a better job than they've ever done. That's what Star Trek is. You know, that's what Star Trek does. The exocomp should have had some interesting way to get themselves out of the situation that only the exocomp could have done. But instead, what do? They give the exocomp a trait they could have given any humanoid crew member, that they're a coward. That's why I hated it. And I think I'm not wrong. You don't get credit for just inclusion. You know, you don't. You have to get credit for showing why inclusion is important. And if you don't do that, it's tokenism, and you're not doing anything that's advancing the cause for anyone. You know, just putting a bunch of people of certain colors, you know, what's really interesting to me is it's not just about inclusion, it's about the voice of inclusion. It's about people that are able to give voice to these things and explain the fact that their experiences, the stories that they can tell, are stories we all have to hear, and we all benefit from those stories. And in a Star Trek context, when you add an exocomp to the, I was waiting for Peanut to do something cool, something that only an exocomp could do. But nope. Turns out that an exocomp can run and hide and be a coward just like any other humanoid. So here's a chance to really show something interesting, Sean. And what do? They fuck it up. They fuck it up. So I don't give Mike credit for just inclusion. I give Mike credit for including and also showing the benefits of why such inclusion is necessary. Because now what Mike has told us is like, well, fuck the exocomps. You can't trust them. When the going gets tough, they turn and run. Is that cool? Am I supposed to like that? No, I don't. So why not give Mike some credit for not just including an exocomp as a token background character, but instead imbuing it with foibles and flaws? No, because Starfleet officers don't have foibles and flaws. I mean, they do, but not give an exocomp a chance to succeed as a Starfleet officer. You do not get on a starship if you have a bunch of foibles and flaws. This is a conceit of modern Trek. Everyone's on the fucking spectrum. You know what? To me, when I was growing up, the people on Starfleet ships, they were in the 99th percentile. Now it's every Starfleet officer gets a goddamn trophy, and I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. That is not aspirational. I don't ever want to feel that I could do a better job than the crew of the Discovery does. And I've never even gone through Starfleet Academy. By the way, we've seen cowardice in Starfleet before, from our heroes no less. Heck, Data acted cowardly when he first activated his emotion chips in Generations. Yes, but that was the point. He added his... The problem is Data doesn't need his emotion chip. You know, of course he acts like a coward, which is a bad thing. I mean, it's like, yes, you do that. And failing to come to the aid of his best friend. Yes, that is a conceit. They had to give Data... an Achilles heel, so they did that. But Data isn't a coward. We've already watched 7 seasons of Next Generation where we know he isn't a coward. They've basically given him an Achilles heel for this particular situation to set up this dramatic beat because Data needed something better to do. If Data had an emotion chip like that and he was a coward, he never would have made it through Starfleet Academy. But God forbid Mike explore the potential pitfalls of an exocomp crew member. Yeah, well, why don't you let the exocomp crew member first define why he's there, or she's there in her case. I mean, the thing is, you don't get on a Starfleet vessel if you're a coward. Because no, we don't want a non-humanoid species to reflect humanity. You know what? That's the whole point with modern Star Trek. That's why I don't like modern Star Trek, is humanity. We're supposed to aspire to be the humanity we see in the future. I don't want to see the humanity of today reflected back at me. You know, the things about Star Trek was, it was the external forces. It was the alien races. It was all of that. Those were the places where we found out. That's where we found humanity reflected back upon us. The humans on Star Trek, like on the original series, they were the people that we wanted to be. And in being that evolved, when they found the races or the situations that were like what we found or we had in the 20th century, like in A Private Little War, hey, they roll up on this planet where Tyree and his people are basically fighting. They're in the middle of Vietnam. And they have to fix that problem. You know, Chicago mobs of the 20s. Our characters were enlightened, but you go down to Sigma Iota and you have to deal with that problem. The whole point is that the Enterprise, as enlightened human beings, our characters were solving the problems, and it was the external forces, those people, that were representing us. Now, all the Star Trek characters are no longer aspirational characters. They're all characters that we recognize. Oh, that person's got learning disabilities just like me. Spock has learning disabilities. Oh, just like me, so I can recognize them. Fuck that shit. That's not what Star Trek is. Anyway. We don't want it to be flawed. We want it to be a perfect, infallible saint. No, we don't want it to be a perfect, infallible saint. But you know what? If you're going to have an exocomp come on to Starfleet, wouldn't it be better if we see something interesting, like let's make an exocomp do something unique that only an exocomp could do? I don't know what that is because we didn't get to see it. The exocomp was just turned into another humanoid with problems, cowardice. I don't believe it. I don't believe that an exocomp would have cowardice. There was a very Star Trek lesson in that B-plot, too. The episode's final scene shows the hapless exocomp floating through space, chirping for help. Message, we need each other. The exocomp chose itself and now needs the help of others to survive. What, you don't think that's been inherent in Star Trek since 1966? That's the whole point of Star Trek. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy needed one another. They're the family. The crews of these ships are families. They need one another. They need to rely on one another. No, that character is floating through space and apparently doomed for all eternity because she was an asshole. And that's not a lesson to learn. That's not what you're taking away. That was the fate that they said, you're a coward. You deserve to be floating through the... a Starfleet officer, consider the fact that there was a lot of time and effort put into her training. But what they did was they basically threw her away. They callously threw away a Starfleet officer. Starfleet officers in modern Star Trek, hey man, if you're a white male Starfleet officer, hey, let's kill you. You know? Let's make you not act like a Starfleet officer. That goes all the way back to Star Trek 09. You meet Starfleet cadets who are meatheads in a bar that start bar fights. Now, the whole thing about starting bar fights, as we saw in the original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, we don't do it. You don't start bar fights. You know, you hang back until, of course, you're Montgomery Scott and somebody goes too far. Basically, you know, he tried. He held on. But what happened was it was his character. It was the character that we knew. We understood that was humorous, the fact that he started the fight in that context of that episode, but it was all based on his character, and we understood. So then you go on. Okay, so let's return to the issue of loss of life. You pointed out in exchanges with others on Twitter that it wasn't the loss of life issue it wasn't the loss of life itself which you took issue. After all, we've all seen tragic loss of life in other Trek iterations. No, it was how that tragedy was portrayed. Let me quote you. This is what I said. Only the Star Trek Lower Decks season finale can turn the mass slaughter of sentient beings into some wacky comedy. I understand my point requires an understanding of nuance, but it's how those things were presented. With Lower Decks being primarily a comedy and a Trek show, utilizing mass carnage in a comedic context is, well, problematic for Trek. Loss of life is played for laughs. That's what I said. Those are my tweets. And then you go on to say, I couldn't agree with you more if I felt the loss of Captain Dayton's ship and the crew was in fact played for comedy. But I don't. The purpose of the ship's destruction was to present the Packlids as a formidable and lethal threat bent on piracy and murder. It was played for shock and awe. I agree. But in the context of Lower Decks, that kind of shock and awe, it was also presented, it was the beginning. It was actually shocking when the ship is destroyed. But then it's never dealt with again. Where is the remorse? Where is Captain Dayton had a friendship with our captain. And do we ever see her mourn for the loss of her friend and the loss of their sister ship? The purpose of the ship's destruction was to present the Packlids as a formidable and lethal threat bent on piracy and murder. It was played for shock and awe. The joke attached to that tragedy was a sidebar played for comedy relief. Here's the joke for any of you listeners who didn't see the episode. Captain Dayton was so jealous of her ship's shiny newness, she wanted it kept in pristine condition, so much so that the bridge crew was in socks, and she jumped on the crewman for walking on the carpet in shoes. She doesn't want so much as a scratch, and the ship goes and gets destroyed. Ha ha ha. But then again, the joke was a sidebar. Star Trek Generations did something similar. When the Enterprise destroys the Duras sisters' bird of prey in Generations, the camera pans to Data, who pumps his fist in the air and gives a robust yes and grunts victoriously. First of all, the fact that you keep holding up Star Trek Generations as the end-all be-all of Star Trek, the movie's not good. It's not peak Star Trek. So to be pointing at Star Trek Generations, when Data gets to say shit for the first time and all that was incongruous then, it's incongruous now. And by the way, that bothered me too. I don't like Star Trek Generations for the same reason. I watched the movie in theaters thrice in the span of a week. Each time the audience laughed. Of course the audience laughed, because what they're doing is, and this is problematic with Star Trek, they're playing to the lowest common denominator because they're making a film where, look, you know what? Look at Star Trek 4. in terms of how to do humor right and how to have earned things happening. You know, when Data says yes or oh shit when the Enterprise is crashing, I mean, yeah, it's pandering, and it's bad then, and it's bad now. It's not good Star Trek. I doubt there are any moviegoers clutching their pearls and saying, that's not funny, people just died. No, because you know what? In Generations, they're dealing with monstrous things going on. But yeah, they don't. Data's reaction is in no way implied that life is not sacred or the Klingons' loss of life a joke. I don't know, it kind of is. Losing Lursen Betor. Moreover, Captain Dayton's jealousy of her unblemished ship was played for juxtaposition at episode's end when Captain Freeman doesn't want the Cerritos repaired to perfection. She doesn't want a false front. She wants the carpet to show wear for the Cerritos to be its imperfect self, a reflection of its imperfect but worthy crew. But that's my problem. That's what modern Star Trek is all about. We don't know how to tell aspirational stories about the humans that we're going to be. We have to bring it back down and make it about us today. You know, before you would have had an alien crew, or you would have had the guest star be the imperfect people. But now it's like, nope. We have to make our crew less than perfect, less than good. Let's make our Starfleet officers deeply flawed and all of that. So she wants the carpet to show wear for the Cerritos to be its imperfect self. See, I don't buy into any of this. This is modern. This is postmodern Star Trek, and that's why I hate it. If you've come with me this far, can I ask you something? Why chose to focus on the negative and omit the positive? Have you tweeted a word of commendation or praise for any aspect of Lower Decks? No, because all of the things that they do that are negative, I think, undercut anything that it does well. It's a mixed bag for me. For instance, you love Star Trek books, Rob. You've helped interview Dayton Ward on Inglorious Treksperts. Establishing the Titan visually in canon, showing it as depicted on the covers of Ward's book, was such a gift to him and fans. I agree, it was. But you know what that is to me? The Star Trek Lower Decks people are taking all of this other stuff that other people have created, and they're employing it rather than create something new. Did I like seeing the Titan? Sure, it was cool. I enjoyed it. Sean Tarangio, who designed the Titan, it was great to see that for him, obviously, because he designed the Ares from Axanar, which is near and dear to my heart, having worked on that. I can say that even now. I think the Ares is one of the best designed Starfleet vessels ever, maybe, even though it's not canonical. And I do like the Titan design. But you know what? So they made the Titan canonical. Yeah, that's cool. But it's like, that already existed. You know, it's, to me, what McMahon has done is he's plundering Star Trek. I want to see something new. You know, it's one thing, when I see 10,000 references per episode, I'm like, well, that's great, but I'd rather see a fucking exocomp, which is something new, be heroic. That was new. That was something interesting. You know, that's something you're bringing forward, something that we never saw again in Next Generation. And you're showing where they came to, what happened. You're adding to the tapestry of the Star Trek universe. I've read his Twitter feed. He was tickled. Does that not stir in you any approval or gratitude? No, because that's fourth wall breaking. I'm glad Dayton Ward is happy. I've read all of Dayton Ward's Star Trek books. That's awesome, and it's great that they use the Titan. But again, they're using the Titan. I think that's shameless fan service. Shameless fan service. Yeah, it's in the spirit of Trek, but again, it's fourth wall breaking Trek that I can't stand. I can't help but feel you're predisposed to hate new Star Trek. I am predisposed to hating new Star Trek. You know why? Because it's been bad. Because it's not good storytelling. And I feel that it panders, and I feel it does not elevate. It does not take us to a higher place, which is where Star Trek certainly took me most of my life. No, what modern Star Trek does is it brings us all down to a certain level. Let's not aspire to be these people anymore. Let's come down here so we can all be, we can understand wacky workplace comedy. No. We don't, because they don't know how to write those characters. They know how to write these characters. They don't know how to write those characters. They don't, because nobody can now. It's like, you know what? Perfect people like this now. We live in a world where everyone's deeply flawed. We've always lived in that world. But anyway, you feel bitterly disappointed, even betrayed by modern Star Trek, and are leery of each new submission. Yes, I am. Because for a decade, That's 20% of my life. For 80% of my life, Star Trek, even though very hit and miss, Voyager, Enterprise hit and miss, I didn't have those problems as much. But these modern iterations of Star Trek, they're dumb. They're monumentally dumb. I want to see some really smart writing. I want a great screenwriter to write Star Trek. Look, and I'll tell you something. I like Ron Moore and I like Brandon Braga, but I think Generations and First Contact were also monumentally dumb movies that make not a lick of sense. I'll tell you that right now. They're dumb. I don't like dumb Star Trek. Make it better. Do better. Write better. Be better. But I also think there's something incongruous about saying you want to see good Trek, that you continue to hold out hope, and then approaching each new entry with a posture of fault-finding. Can't one be fair when his spirit's closed? Does anticipating disappointment become self-prophecy? No. Because you know what? If they had a great episode that was truly great, I'd be like, that was great. I mean, great episodes, great movies, and great entertainment are self-evident. They're self-evident. I don't judge. Whenever I watch a new episode of Star Trek, I don't go into it with trepidation being, oh, it already sucks. I'm like, maybe this time it's going to be great. It's just like James Bond movies. I love the James Bond franchise. I get excited for every single movie. But when I see movies like View to a Kill or License to Kill or Spectre, I'm like, why did that movie suck? I wanted to love Spectre. I figured, my God, what a production team. But if it's bad, it's bad. And anyway, if I may be so bold, here's to your hopeful perseverance. May this season of discovery meet your lofty expectations for Trek. May true hope lead to true openness. Should I hold my breath? Well, I would say you should hold your breath for whether Discovery is going to be good or not. Look, I think it's really interesting. They're now unfettered by Star Trek history for the most part. They've gone deep into the future. They've taken a tack that I wouldn't take. I mean, clearly dystopian. Somebody just said, well, wasn't your idea for Star Trek Federation dystopian? And I'm like, no. When we had our Star Trek Federation pitch, the idea was the Federation was old. It wasn't a dystopia. It was old. And the idea was, how do you bring back, really my idea for our I had a pitch that I came up with over a conversation. It was Bryan Singer, Chris McQuarrie, and I at a dinner. And then the great Jeff Thorne told him all this, and he wrote up the document, the pitch document based on these ideas I threw out. And he wrote this great pitch document. But my idea was, the whole premise behind our Star Trek Federation was that America, allegorically, it was where America is sort of now. Our infrastructure, in our idea, the Federation was old. The Romulans and the Vulcans had reunified, and they weren't much interested in Federation business. The Klingons had become more warrior monks. There were, like the Tang Dynasty. There was all this stuff. The galaxy had changed, but the Federation really hadn't. And the Federation was more of a peacekeeping force. They no more exploration, and it was just old. It was creaking. And when an adversary shows up and threatens the sovereignty of the Federation has to figure out a way, well, wait a minute, we've become complacent. Utopia after hundreds of years, what do? And how do we bring the luster back to the Federation? And the whole idea was, how do we bring the luster back to the United States? That's what allegorically the show was going to be about. But the thing is, it wasn't dystopian. It was just old. How do you reinvigorate old concepts and make them new again? But should you hold your breath, Sean? I don't know. We'll see you next week. Looks like University of Illinois. Anyway, so there you go. Ultimately, I have to ask myself, I just want the same things that I've always wanted. I want to see great stories well told. Great stories that make sense, that in terms of Star Trek make me think, are thought-provoking and aspirational. And at the end of the day, they show characters and situations, the characters especially, characters that I want to be. Characters that I aspire to be. That's what I want from Star Trek ultimately. Give me people that I wish were in my life, that I knew had my back. Give me people like the crew of the original Enterprise. Those old scientists. I mean, even the idea of TOS was those old scientists, they've now taken the moniker, well, the acronym, the TOS, the original series. That's how we refer to Star Trek. Those old scientists, old. I mean, those old scientists knew how to tell stories and knew how to develop characters a lot better than modern Star Trek does. Those old scientists had a lot to teach you. All you have to do is listen. And with that, wait, let me answer the question. Have I become just an old Star Trek fan yelling at clouds? Yes. Yes, I have. But you know what? I'm right. And the current stewards of the franchise are not doing the job they should be doing. They are shirt tailors. They're not shirt sleevers. They're shirt tailors. Anyway, let's read your letters, shall we? And besides, I mean, people are like, oh, Rob, who are you to say this? And it's so funny. Like, look, let me also get something straight. I am not jealous that I'm not working on a Star Trek show. I've never worked in television. I've directed 5 episodes of Femme Fatales. While I was an HBO-approved director, yes. But I've never worked on a network show. I've never worked in a writer's room. I'm not a WGA member. I'm not jealous. That's why I wanted to make Star Trek Axanar as a feature film, because it was the way I could make a Star Trek feature film, because I know that I would never be able to make a Star Trek feature film in my life. So making a fan film was the closest thing I could have done to do that. Well, that went pear-shaped. But, I'll tell you something. I got to write and direct a movie that starred my childhood idol, William Shatner. And as far as I'm concerned, I win. I mean, as a Star Trek fan, my Film Free Enterprise that you can watch clips from, it's the only movie I've directed. And you know what? I'd like to direct more films, but still, the fact that I got to make a movie that I wrote, directed, and edited with my childhood idol, William Shatner, it doesn't get any better than that for me. So this idea that I'm somehow jealous of people making modern Star Trek, no. My Star Trek, I'm fine. I got to work on the Next Generation Blu-rays. We made the documentaries. I worked on the Star Trek Experience. I've had so much professional Star Trek in my life. I don't necessarily need to do, and I don't, by the way, to be honest, I think if I was ever given a job, if I was hired to work on Star Trek Discovery or Picard or Section 31 or Strange New Worlds, if I was ever hired to work on those shows, I would get fired. I would not last long. I would not play well with others, certainly not the stuff that I feel that they're coming up with. I wouldn't work. It wouldn't be good. Now, if somebody hired me to direct the Eric Jedrinson Star Trek The Beginning script, well, that I could do. But modern Star Trek, I couldn't work on those shows. I wouldn't fit in, even as a consultant. David Mack, one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, he's working as a consultant on Prodigy. I mean, he should really be writing the series, but okay, he's working as a consultant. I hope they throw him a bone and give him an episode to write, because they've got the greatest resource in the world, and let's hope they're using it in him. That's what I would say. So I am not jealous that I am not working on modern Star Trek. I really am not. I have my own original things that I'm working on, and I'm proud of the work I've done. The movie I produced, Tango Shalom, will start playing in film festivals in February. I edited the film, and I spent 4 years of my life making it. So that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about John Campia's movie Trailers a Love Story that's coming out. I was associate producer of that. I'm actually in that movie as well. So am I jealous? No, I got my own things going on. Ashley Miller's Netflix series that I've been working on. Proud to have done that. I've worked on 17 episodes of it so far, which is longer than most of the people in the Star Trek writing staffs have lasted. So there you go. Anyway, let's see where we're at now. Let's see what letters you guys have to. What have you written in? What have you written in? Actually, you know what? We'll get to letters next. Let's jump and see what you guys are saying in the chat, or in over here. What you fired into me. I'm sure people are like, Rob's on a rant again, which I think is pretty fun. First of all, wow, I have to tell you, you guys, I didn't know if this membership thing with the channel, as we know that now there's memberships. It's crazy how this is taking off. So Joshua G became a member, Sean M became a member, Win Goddess became a member, Stephen Goggin became a member. You can become a member of the PGS for 99 cents a month. By the way, you're already, if you're watching this channel, everybody is a member of the Post-Geek Singularity. All of you are long-time members. This membership thing wasn't even available till we hit 30,000 subscribers. It's just kind of fun. It should be a fun thing, but you don't have to be a part of it. It doesn't matter. I have all kinds of things coming along. By the way, as I don't know if people know, we are having a Zoom Halloween party. This is a free party. You don't have to be a member or anything like that. We're going to have a Zoom Halloween party for, it's a combination, Robservations and Elizaviews. It's going to be Saturday the 24th, but there is something mandatory. You do not get into the Zoom party without a costume. Now, you only have to have it like this, right? You don't have to have a full body costume, but you've got to, if you don't have a costume on, sorry, SOL. I don't care if you're a member or not. This is a costume party. It comes along once a year. October 24th, I believe it's going to start at 4 o'clock, and we'll see how far it goes. I expect everybody to be drinking. But yes, we are going to have that, and that should be fun. That's for all imagination connoisseurs. Stephen Goggin became a member. Tom42 became a member. Willow says, will big-budget movies just be released on digital if all of the major theaters go out of business? Do you think that movies costing $200 million can turn a profit on digital and streaming alone? These are good questions. The answer to both is no. If theaters are not going to go totally out of business, the worldwide theatrical market, well, actually, you know what? Let me rephrase. There's a lot of, over the next 2 years, 3 years, there's a lot of movies that have already been made that are in the quiver that need to be shot out. The arrows that the studios have in their quivers. These movies need to make $1 billion to show profit, 800 million to $1 billion. So I think the studios are going to have to step up and keep movie theaters alive. It really depends on how long COVID is with us, because even at half capacity, you're diminishing the ability for studios to get their money back. It's bad news. So yeah. So Tom42 became a member. And do you think that movies costing $200 million can turn a profit? No, they can't. They can't. Unless, like with Netflix, they understand. They're building in the fact that a $200 million movie. I don't understand that economic model. I don't know why, if you're Netflix, why do you have to spend $200 million on a movie? I guess because of the talent involved. But to me, I don't see that as, why not make $200 million movies? It's very odd to me, but we'll see. Calvin Bowes is here. Calvin says Braxton, his son, discovered Bugsy Malone. I own Bugsy Malone on Blu-ray, directed by the great Alan Parker. My name is Tallulah. Jodie Foster. Do you remember that movie with the flack that Cuties got? Do you think this movie would get that flack today when you see the dancing girls in this film? Well, I think the difference between Cuties and Bugsy Malone is that clearly the joke of Bugsy Malone, well, the conceit is that you have, if anyone hasn't seen Bugsy Malone, it's basically a kids movie where the kids are playing gangsters in Chicago, Tommy guns, but instead of Tommy guns, they have splurge guns that shoot whipped cream. So even though you've got like 1920s flappers and all that, girls dressed up, I don't think they're being necessarily, there isn't any kind of weird sexualization going on. It's more like they're playing 20s flappers. It's more of a Halloween vibe. I don't think it's the same thing at all. By the way, I love Bugsy Malone. I loved it since I was a little kid. The Little Trekkie became a member. Electron Star Collapse became a member. Don't let the stars collapse on you, which is great. Star Wars Rock sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. I sent in a letter the other day, I think was in Wednesday's show with Az, actually, and I was wondering if you've read it on air yet. I don't know. I think I did. I remember reading something from you recently. I might have. John became a member. Hello, John. John says, I rarely go on Twitter, so I missed whatever happened yesterday. I have to say I was thinking to myself yesterday that you finally made a good case for your opinion of Star Trek, an opinion that I share, by the way. Oh, thank you, sir. John goes on to say, I watched all the Trek in question, including Lower Decks. I equate it to when Yes came out with 902. No, isn't it 902? Okay, 90215. Is that the name? No Rick Wakeman or Steve Howe. The new guitar player was a shredder, but at the time I was so starved for new Yes and the tour that I loved it. Hang on a second. Let me. Is that right? Is that the album? Let's see. Hang on. I got to check your facts here. 902. It's that's what I thought. It's 90210. 90210. Not 90215. Owner of a Lonely Heart. Leave It. One down, one to go. Another town, one more show. I like that album, but you're right. Is it still Yes without Rick Wakeman or Steve Howe? That's a really good. Nicely done. John goes on to say, I'm hoping when people ever see good Star Trek again, they'll realize just how bad this Kurtzman Trek is. I love the rant. Yeah, I'm going to keep ranting. Because look, what am I saying? I'm not like I'm saying that they're bad people. I don't think they're bad people. I just think that they're not the right people to be writing Star Trek. And that's okay. Look, in the entertainment business, if you get a job, you hold on to it. Secret Hideout they're going to make Star Trek as long as they can ride that wave, man. They're getting paid. They're making big bucks. Star Trek Discovery is one of the most expensive shows ever made. I'm sure thinking this season 3 the spending was curtailed, but why not do it? It's just that what I do think is being lost is I really think these shows are not going to age well. Star Trek Picard is not having just been going through Elizabeth's now in the 7th season of Next Generation, having literally once again, last time I did it was when I was working on the Blu-rays, going through Next Generation again, you realize just how far Picard is from Star Trek The Next Generation. And it's a bummer. It's kind of a bummer. I don't dig it, man. I don't dig it. So I'll keep ranting. Why not? Eric Gant is here. Hello, Eric. While my attempt to love Lower Decks failed, I don't quite hate the show. Listen, I got to tell you something. There are things about it that I find charming or make me smile or whatever. I don't hate it. I mean, I guess. Actually, no, I do. I really do hate it. I do hate it because it is making fun of Star Trek. It wants to be both Star Trek and a parody of Star Trek, and I don't dig it. I don't dig it. So when my attempt to love Lower Decks failed, I don't quite hate the show. Overall, it felt mostly bland, with a few moments here and there that managed to scratch the old fandom itch. Case in point, seeing the Luna-class USS Titan in action. Yeah, I know, but you know what? I read the novels, man. I read the Titan novels, and I'll tell you, I did not like the depiction. I liked having Jonathan Frakes, but like he seemed like he was hopped up on whatever he was hopped up on. They just left Risa with their Horgon, and it was weird. But I guess it was funny, Riker, so why not? Sadly, my joy at seeing the Titan and hearing the TNG theme was quickly squashed by the weird, frenetic depiction of Riker and the bland caricature of Troy. It felt like receiving a beer from a friend and discovering they'd slipped a bug into it. Man, Eric, you and I so park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Here's the problem. And you know what? Most people, most Star Trek fans, just like most genre fans, are happy with that stuff. And that's fine. That's fine. That's great. But yeah, the portrayal was weird. It was weird. And I'm right there with you, man. Stub McShave said, a known concept that's relevant for many established companies that fail is the builder, the steward, and the destroyer. That's exactly right. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Shirt sleeves to shirt tails. Many companies built by entrepreneurs where the child helps steward it often falls when the third generation takes over. That's exactly where Star Trek is. That's where Star Trek is, and it has been since 2009. But you know what? It was... J.J. Abrams was a kid that wasn't even interested. He look up any interview. I never liked Star Trek. Then why the fuck are you directing it, dude? Why? Because he got paid. He saw Bad Robot getting an opportunity. They didn't get the merchandising they wanted. Then they moved over to Star. I mean, all you have to do to me is look at Star Trek 09 or better yet, watch Into Darkness and The Rise of Skywalker back to back and ask yourself, how did that happen? How did that happen? Like, look, I give J.J. Abrams all the credit in the world. He's made some great TV. He's made shit tons of cash. But I'll tell you something. I would not want to go to my grave having made Star Trek Into Darkness or Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I mean, I think both of those movies are an affront to the franchises they come from, and I don't understand how either one of those films got made. I mean, I do understand. What I mean is I don't understand like this is what happened. It's so hard to get movies made, and we get Into Darkness. Look at how much Into Darkness cost. Yeah, let's put people in torpedoes. I still don't understand. I don't even understand that. I'm going to beam from my snub fighter to the Klingon homeworld to do what? I don't know. I don't get it. Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, we're going to hyperspace, skip into the middle of a city. Yeah, that makes sense. Terrible. But you're absolutely right. That's exactly what it is. The builder, the steward, and the destroyer. We are in the destroyer era of Star Trek. That's where we are, because the people that are making Star Trek want to create their own. They're trying to turn Star Trek, and they're already they're the hipsters on the outside. They're like, looking in. So what we need, again, can I just bring him up yet again? You want to see somebody who... Everybody who's working on franchise properties, there's places to look. Cobra Kai. Look at Cobra Kai. Look at what Ryan Coogler did with Creed. Those are the two. If you're going to revive a new franchise, or you're going to revive an old franchise, look at Cobra Kai and look at Creed. Those are where you look. If anybody's going to start, if they hire somebody to make a new Star Trek series, go look at how Creed treats the Rocky franchise. Now, do I mean you have to copy it exactly? No. What I mean is, look at how Ryan Coogler, as a writer-director, treats the Rocky franchise in his movie Creed. It's fantastic. He does the same thing that the writers and the creators of Cobra Kai are doing. Who would have thought we'd live in a day, an age, where somebody would take the Karate Kid and make a sequel 35 years after the fact, and it's going into its fourth season? This is amazing. Everybody who wants to create a franchise property and bring back an old franchise, look at those shows, man. You know what? They didn't go, let's recast. No, let's go get Ralph Macchio and Bill. Bill, I mean, who would have thought? It's amazing. Anyway. Luis Sparrow sends in a tip and says, you aren't wrong about modern Star Trek, Rob, and it helps the rest of us that love Star Trek on the inside to know that there are still fans that understand it and will talk so eloquently about what made it great. Thank you. Well, Luis, I don't know how eloquent I've been, but I do appreciate that. But I think that only comes with being, a lifelong fan that has also studied storytelling and science fiction, and I still do, and I still have a verve for it. I mean, I'm never far away from, well, I'm actually far, as I've already shown this, but like the funny thing about Star Trek is the one thing I could say, if they did come to me and they said, they did hire me for Star Trek, I'd be like, this is David Mack's latest Star Trek book. It's set in the Kelvinverse. It was supposed to get published 10 years ago. Well, actually, in 2009, there were 4 books written. The Alan Dean Foster version and the David Mack version have come out. These books were written over 10 years ago, and for whatever reason, they didn't. I mean, I know the reason, but they weren't published. So yeah, but I mean, I keep up with my Star Trek, all of it. So, yeah. But thank you, I appreciate that, Louise. Julius Goodwin, how are you, man? Julia says, just a heads up, you have a new Knocking Point vintage coming our way soon. I got a FedEx delivery notice for tomorrow. They named it Comeback Wine for reasons which I've never understand. I hope you enjoy it. Well, don't call it a comeback. I can't wait to get that. Thank you very much. John says, the long and short of my previous somewhat confusing tips is I 100% agree with your take on Star Trek. Glad more people today are hearing your POV. Yeah, but more people today than not hate my guts. John says, did you ever see the South Park talking about member berries? Oh, yes. Lower Decks to me is all member berries with plots that are poorly written. Yeah, I think, and I've got friends that have worked on that show. They're 2 people I like very much, that I admire, that were writing on that show. But yeah, it is all member. Well, that's the funny thing. The constant nods to classic Star Trek is or Next Gen or whatever just get annoying after a while. Like, give me one. Like but not don't in all the dialogue. They're just throwing out these asides that are so annoying because I don't believe they're sincere. It's somebody went to Memory Alpha or whatever. But McMahon wrote this episode, and I know the thing is I know Mike McMahon loves Star Trek, but Mike McMahon loves Star Trek from the outside. He is a smart guy that loves Star Trek, but he's on the outside of it. He's never been on the inside of it. Judging by his writing and judging by his TNG season 8 thing, there's always that element, and I find that a lot with comedians. There's always that sort of outside. It's very difficult, people who write comedy, I think, to be sincere about something. I mean, they can, because they're always observing things from the outside. I mean, that might not be, somebody's going to say, Rob, that's not always true, and maybe it's not. But as I have observed, because there's a lot of, like, Patton Oswalt is maybe the only person that I think exists. Patton Oswalt, I think, is a man of two worlds. I think Patton Oswalt exists inside sci-fi. Patton Oswalt is a true imagination connoisseur, and he does exist inside. But he also exists outside. He can work within both. That is very difficult to do. He might be the only one. So Hassan is here. Hassan says, please keep yelling at clouds. I'm just happy to see you alive and well. Did you like this season of The Boys? They used the super goop scene, man. The Boys, I thought, it was an interim season, but I really did like what they were doing. There's a lot of stuff I wish they'd developed more. And there's directions they went in that some didn't go very far. But yeah, I think The Boys is a very subversive show, and I really like what they're doing. And they did that. I couldn't wait to end your season. I kept waiting to see it. Would have been too much. I'm sure they couldn't have. I wanted to see the results of that. Where did that go? But it felt a little out of place after everything Homelander went through in the final episode. I agree with you, Hassan. I thought the soup goop scene was like, wow, what are we gonna do? I wanted something more. Like I wanted. I gotta tell you, Anthony Starr, man, that guy, that scene with his son where he's talking to his son, that guy is a great actor. He is a great actor, and that scene with his son, man, I love him. Anthony Starr can do no wrong, as far as I'm concerned. Calvin Bose says Braxton loved Lower Decks, but still feels the older stuff is better. He did not like Discovery or Picard. Look, Braxton should like Lower Decks. He should. I understand that, but he's a good kid. You're raising him right. AJDZ sent in a super chat and said, thanks for including my Spidey movie in the festival. Disney had the good sense to bury Star Wars detours. Viacom went ahead with their parody anyway. Yeah, what a bummer. I don't understand why. For those of you who don't know, we had a movie that is very interesting that dropped in the Imagination Connoisseur Film Festival. It had its premiere. Let's see. I'll get the link so you can see it. And it dropped yesterday. I put it up. It's a world premiere, and it comes from Australia. And one of the things I really liked about it was that I said this yesterday on the show, that you have these 3 Australian guys playing legends from the Marvel Comics world, and it's called Web of Intrigue, and it's pretty interesting. I'm going to put this in the live chat for you guys to look at it, and all of the here it is. All of the movies, the world premieres are up. You can see them on the YouTube channel, and check it out. But I really thanks for making a movie and submitting it to the festival. The film festival is, and you know what? I invite all of you. One of the things that I'm doing is one of the things that we're doing on this channel, and we're going to be doing more things. The real reason that we wanted to have members and memberships was to generate more funds to make more things and do more things like the film festival. I want to create more narrative programming. I want to put my money where my mouth is. Like, I would love to make series. I would love to make these shows. I really would love to do things, and that's what we're hoping. We're going to put it all back into the channel and to create more stuff. So, yeah. So Hassan says, Hassan says, keep yelling at clouds. I'm just happy to see you alive and well. Did you like The Boys Season 2? The soup goop scene felt a little out of place after everything Homelander went through. Carl Urban was incredible. Carl Urban was incredible. Incredible. He's so good in the show. So good in the show. Nick Parrish is here. Nick Parrish says, hi, Rob. I'm curious. Did you ever find out what the Empty Man is? I know it's another Disney stepchild from Fox that Disney is dumping in theaters in 2 weeks, but I haven't seen a teaser for the movie. All I know is that it's listed as a horror movie. I do not know what the Empty Man is. I do not know. Philip Alvarez became a member of the channel. Thank you, sir. I don't know what the Empty Man is. Kevin Rubio is calling me. I have to take this call because we're working on this project. Let's see. Hey, Kevin Rubio, you are live on Robservations.
Well, hello there, imagination connoisseurs.
Kevin, as the man who made one of the great fan films of all time, Troops,
Yes.
what do you think the secret is? Like one of the things I love about Troops, and we're talking about Star Trek Lower Decks, but I think where Lower Decks fails, you made a comedy, a Star Wars comedy, but it absolutely works canonically in the Star Wars universe. You don't betray the Star Wars universe. You don't make fun of the Star Wars universe. You clearly have made a comedy,
Yeah.
but Troops absolutely works as a comedy set within the Star Wars universe, but it doesn't destroy anything. And then you also wrote the Tag and Bink series for Dark Horse, now published by Marvel, which is also very funny. You basically create the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of the Star Wars universe. And again, you wrote an incredibly funny Star Wars comic that still shows fealty to Star Wars itself. They both exist together, but your comedy never takes away from the original Star Wars films. How were you able to do that?
Well, somebody has described my stuff as I laugh with Star Wars. I don't laugh at it.
Right. Okay.
And if I'm gonna try to do a class in breaking down humor, I think humor has a lot to do with what is relatable.
By the way, I want to tell the viewers I did not plan for you to call in when I was on the show.
Yeah.
This is a happy because this is so relevant to what I think is amazing. So yeah, keep going. I don't
comedy is subjective, but oftentimes the comedy that works best is comedy that is relatable. That you can empathize or sympathize with whatever the situation is. And so I try to find commonalities that both exist in the universe I am in and the universe that I am writing about.
But what was interesting was, like in real life, there's comedy all around us all the time.
Yeah.
But seriousness, it all coexists. But you were able to write comedic characters that still exist within the comedic characters. You still believe that these comedic characters were still a part of the tapestry of the Star Trek universe while still being funny, as opposed to being written as wacky comedy characters. They were written as characters that happen to be comedic and get in comedic situations, but they still work within. It was still situational.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's situational comedy. It's not gags.
Right.
Although I do visual gags, but they are more like what I guess Lower Deck does is Easter eggs. But, I just do absurd because of the medium of comics that allows you to look over the image at your own pace and go back or linger. I tend to have my artist, Lucas Marangon, pepper the page with visual gags that are apart from the story, similar to Airplane.
Right.
Because, Airplane plays it straight. The wacky stuff is going on in the background, but everybody in the foreground is dead serious.
Right.
In what they are doing. And so I tried to keep that in mind when I was doing Tag and Bink. and that again, it's situational. You
Well,
know,
I mean, what was interesting when you did Troops, the idea, doing a cops parody set in the Star Wars universe, but dealing with Aunt Beru and
yeah,
and Jawas and everything, it's still like you're like, well, that could happen. There are stormtroopers on Tatooine, and so it's just we're seeing them portrayed differently, but still you're like, okay, I believe this situation could happen because Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen are shown as being, you know, with reverence in Star Wars, but they're still a squabbling married couple, and
sure.
so they have a domestic quarrel or something, and you believe that could happen because we know in Star Wars we're only seeing one facet of those characters, but they're humanoids, so they could easily get into a quarrel.
Well,
And
you can extrapolate from it. You know, it's harvest time. They're down. You know, they're down employees. Their robots aren't working. You know, tensions flare.
but
And that's
again, that's situational.
yeah.
You're not creating some wacky Star Wars situation within the universe
No,
that is forced to make something comedic.
no, no.
You don't have somebody getting drunk with a Klingon batleth and accidentally stabbing her fellow crewman in the leg,
No, I do not.
which is something that wouldn't necessarily ever happen because you have to make these characters unbelievable. But the way you wrote them, especially your stormtroopers,
Yeah,
and what's really interesting, like the stormtroopers that you wrote in Troops
yeah,
are very competent stormtroopers. They're good at their jobs. Like even when one of them targets the poor Jawa who gets shot, the stormtroopers are good. Whereas, like in The Mandalorian, when they had the scene with the stormtroopers, they play them. It's a joke.
yeah,
Like they broke in The Mandalorian when you see those two stormtroopers shooting at the whatever they're shooting at. There again, I mean, to me that breaks the fourth wall because only we know. It's like red shirts in Star Trek.
yeah.
We know as the audience that red shirts die. Even though if you really look at the episodes of Star Trek, that's not necessarily true. There is not an inordinate amount of red shirts that die. It's just that in the course of the plot of the series, you see more of them die. But in terms of numbers and people who die in Star Trek episodes, that's not true. But you treated stormtroopers as realistic characters that are good at what they do, that are dangerous and dead shots, and yet in real quote unquote real Star Wars, they still make fun. That, and to my mind, when they do that now, they're breaking a fourth wall by making the stormtroopers incompetent.
Although it did take my stormtroopers two times before they could down the Jawa.
Well, it's true, but he was running.
Yeah, he was running, and here's the behind the scenes. The reason why it took two times is because Dave, who was wearing the Jawa outfit, the winds were blowing at about 25 miles an hour. So you have that to contend with. He has a ski mask on, then he has a hood on. He's a distance away. I said bang, and he didn't fall. And so I had to yell it again.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
That's why it takes two shots. It's because I said bang. Eric, who was firing, did the cocking recoil motion, and then the Jawa didn't drop. And then for the second time, Dave finally heard me and fell to the ground. And so that's why it took two shots.
By the way, Eric Gant just says, Tag and Bink is awesome. R.I.P. Manny Bothans. He died to bring us this information. Why don't you tell us who Manny Bothans is, Kevin, in your comic?
That would be Robert Meyer Burnett.
And how did that come about?
That came about because I think you relayed the story to me, the joke itself, who I guess
Brian Singer told me this thing about that
Yeah.
when when Mon Mothma says in Return of the Jedi, many Bothans died. Like Bothans were a race of aliens, but Brian had said, what if Mon Mothma, she's really saying Manny Bothans and that was like her lover? And I told you that.
Yes, and I said, that's good, that's going in, and I'm going to make you the guy.
Yeah, you had him draw him even though I was a little short to the ground, but I was more the Tyrion Lannister version of myself. But yes, I'm canonically a Star Wars character.
Yeah. Oh, man. Hey, so are you in the Robservatory right now?
Yes, I am in, but nobody's home I mean, I don't know how long I'm going to be doing the show,
Ah,
but
because I'm like 200 feet from the Robservatory.
oh, well, can you like hang out and wait? Because the
Yeah,
Robservatory is a huge mess. Our drive is a huge mess, and
yeah, no problem.
okay.
I you want me to? Do you want me to like? I can go around the block and maybe get some drinks or something for us. You want that?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Huh?
Yeah, get some alcoholic beverages.
I will do that.
All right, that sounds good. I should say that
I,
I should tell people that we are working on a project together. So
yeah,
this is work related.
it is.
All right,
Take care.
I'll take you. See you later. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Kevin and I, Kevin Rubio, who made Troops and who wrote the Tag and Bink comics, he and I worked together at Kids WB, Warner Brothers. I was a producer editor of commercials there, and Kevin wrote and conceived of these commercials. And he's very smart. We've been working on developing an animated project together for a long time. So one of the things that I've been doing this has nothing to do with the other animated project I've been working on for Netflix. This is something totally different that he and I have been developing for quite some time together, which I'm hoping you will hear about soon. If I can say that, soon. Let's see, where was I? I don't even know where I was here. I hope that was a welcome. I hope you guys found that a welcome distraction. But you know how interesting that I think that Kevin making Troops is he did with Troops exactly what I think that and with his comic Tag and Bink, which is exactly what I think Lower Decks I would like to see more of. But that's just me. That's a thing. Where was I? Philip Alvarez became a member. Alexander Wilson's here, and Alexander Wilson says, I was listening to the actor Lord Jamar podcast, who had J.D. Wallace, Bodie from The Wire, and they said acting prospects were on. They were on because HBO's Oz, because they had deadlines that they had to hit, so there wasn't that much due diligence. Opinion. Wait a minute. I was listening to the actor Lord Jamar podcast with J.D. Wallace, Bodie from The Wire, and they said that acting projects they were on were chaos because they had deadlines that they had to hit, so there wasn't much due diligence. Opinion. That happens. You know, there's deadlines are everything, and man, HBO's Oz, man, I used to watch that show going, whoo, they're getting away with a lot on this show. But I could see that. I mean, look, in my mind, the best way to make films and television is planning. The more planning that you have, the better off you are, always. And I think that's with television or with films, the more planning, the better off you are. The better off you are. So absolutely. But that's not the way that I think great movies are necessarily made. You got to plan. Captain April says, I sent you one of the best analytical pieces I've done in years, and I get ignored. I'm very disappointed, Rob. Oh, I have your piece, man. You haven't been ignored. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. There's still another day in the weekend. I've got a trilogy coming. Mrs. Yerke sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. Would you tell my husband to stop watching new Star Trek? Kurtzman Trek is beyond bad. Mrs. Yerke. Well, I can't. You know what? I don't want to be. See, literally, here's the thing. Everyone accuses me of being some kind of a Star Trek gatekeeper. I'm not a gatekeeper. There's no such thing as gatekeeping until somebody's actually has a real gate that is keeping you from watching something. What I can't stand is people throw this term gatekeeping around because they can't stand having an actual critical discussion about why people don't like things that you like. If you like something, I mean, if you want to just like something, that's fine. But if somebody doesn't like what you like, don't then turn around and call them a gatekeeper. Be able to fight for your opinion. Be able to understand why do you like things. Hey, if you want to just like something casually, that's fine. But don't get mad because somebody doesn't like something that you like and then throw out that term. It's gatekeeping. Fuck you, man. Gatekeeping. There is no gate preventing you from watching anything. And if I have an opinion that you don't like, well, then have a conversation with me about it. I want to know what you think. I will never get mad at somebody for telling me they like something that I don't like. I want to know why people like something. That's why I read the tweet today. I thought actually everything that he said, everything that was in his Sean's Twitter answer to me, everything that he said was very valid. And I understand exactly where he's coming from. And I don't think that he's wrong necessarily. It's just that where I'm coming from is in a different place. Like what he was asking me about the exocomps. On one hand, I think Sean was correct. You always want to see like a Horta. What you've been calling for is to see something like an exocomp or a Horta show up on an episode of Star Trek. So shouldn't you be happy about it? Well, I'm not just happy that somebody shows up. It's how they're portrayed. That's the whole thing about, inclusion. Whether you're going to have people that are marginalized or whatever, like for instance, if you're going to have a non-binary or a trans character in Star Trek, I really hope that we learn something about the non-binary and trans experience that will help us understand, that will help us be uplifted, that will help us know why are you putting a character like that on the show. And if you are, we have to know. You can't just say that somebody's non-binary or trans. You got to tell us something. You got to educate us about this experience. You have to tell us, what is it like? And by the way, in a Star Trek episode, I would like to see a Star Trek episode. If you're going to put a trans character in a Star Trek episode, maybe there's something from the trans experience that we don't know, that we can all benefit from by hearing about it in the context of a great story. I mean, I don't know what that is, but I'm sure that there is a way to tell an interesting science fiction story. I mean, that's what I think that when you're talking about the Trill race or something, it's allegorical. It's got to be something interesting. But if you're going to put people in a show, and especially a Star Trek show, make it uplifting. Tell us something that we don't know. Give us insight that'll make us better human beings. That's what Star Trek does. It makes us better people. I watch Star Trek Lower Decks. I don't feel like I'm a better person when it's over. And I know that's a tall order. But you know what? I learned so much from Star Trek growing up. Star Trek does teach inclusion, and it does teach tolerance, but not just by throwing people in of various colors or creeds or whatever. Star Trek Deep Space Nine is a very inclusive show, and it didn't ask to be patted on the back because of it. That's what I want. I want Star Trek to be aspirational. I don't want it to be, I feel like it's kind of becoming very tokenistic, and it's not, I don't know. Simon sends in a tip and says, the real issue of today's Star Trek is that good science fiction has been taken over by Star Wars storytelling. Hear, hear. I totally agree with that. I would say that a show that hasn't is The Expanse because it's based on a series of books. And but I think you're absolutely right. What the producers should do is not call it Star Trek, make it derivative of the Star Trek universe. Here's why. Star Trek is about the exploration in the utopian verse. Ooh, that's interesting. In the United Federation of Planets. If they want to do the Star Wars thing, then do a version of the Dreadnought-class starship set in the Federation Klingon Wars prior to Captain Christopher Pike's time. I know that Captain Robert April needs his story told. They could do a show about Captain April's story before Captain Archer. The point is, Star Trek is about the Constitution-class starships that were made for scientific exploration, mid-combat, and diplomatic escort storylines. Well, Simon, you're not wrong. But the problem is, how do you get more of an audience? Here's the problem with Star Trek. The problem with Star Trek has always been its appeal has been limited. It's always been limited. It's only appealed to a niche audience. Because there's only a niche audience that appreciates the things that Star Trek is espousing. And one of the things that I believe about Star Trek, that Star Trek is an elitist show. Star Trek is a show about only the best of us. I mean, sure, are there deeply flawed people on Star Trek? Of course. Alien races and all that, but the people in Star Trek, Jean-Luc Picard, he's not flawless. He has shortcomings. However, he's portrayed as being someone that represents the best of humanity. And along with so many other things, that's really hard. It's really hard in this day and age to aspire to people that are so good. We have to make them more familiar because we can't, not everybody can be Jean-Luc Picard, but Star Trek should be showing us stories about the very best of us. And I feel that Lower Decks is like everything else. Let's not tell stories about Star Trek has become about people that every kid every kid gets a trophy generation. They're people that want safe spaces in colleges because they can't deal with intellectual concepts. They feel like, if something makes me feel wrong, that's violence. I need to be protected from that. Star Trek is about people that are better than that. And I think that's the real problem. That is the real problem. Alexander Wilson says, I loved Creed and Coogler, but nobody had faith in it. They didn't. They couldn't get funding to finish the final editing and production of it. Stallone said one of the producers took out a second mortgage to complete it. If he didn't do that, it would not premiere. Yeah, but you know what? Those people won. Ryan Coogler had a vision. And what balls on that kid? He went to Sylvester Stallone and he said, you know what? I have an idea about your signature character, your franchise, your movie that won Best Picture. This is why I've never met Ryan Coogler, but Ryan Coogler is one of my heroes in the entertainment business because of this. He made Fruitville Station, a movie about a very important event that happened that said a lot about race relations and policing in America today. You know, I'd much rather seeing what goes on in the streets. I'd rather people be watching more Fruitville Station and asking those tough questions. But Ryan Coogler, man, he had a vision, he had a belief, and he made it happen. And Creed, that's the success story. That's what you want to see happen. You want to see people that believe, man. Especially in France. Can you imagine if a Ryan Coogler got a hold of Star Trek? You know, and somebody of his caliber of filmmaker could go on and do something unique that honored what came before, yet tell us a new story? I mean, come on. He gave Stallone his best role since as Rocky since the original. Fantastic. Simon sends in a tip. I already read Simon's. Alexander Wilson goes on and says, Vince Gilligan loves Trek. There are so many Trek homages in the Breaking Bad universe. He wanted to cast Delancey as Jane's dad because he loved him as Q. What if he was in control of Trek? He probably has something better in the Breaking Bad universe. Well, yeah, Vince Gilligan got to create the Breaking Bad universe and Better Call Saul, so he's doing great, which is fantastic. But yeah, awesome. Amazing. But I would like to see a showrunner of that strength. A showrunner that is the writer-producer that Vince Gilligan is. I'd love to see something like that happen. Richie1138, nice reference, sent in a super chat and says, I watch The Orville and see a lot of classic Trek in it. Absolutely. Seth seems to get it way more than any of the writers of modern Trek, even though he writes comedy. Oh, I agree. I think The Orville does comedy much better than, say, Lower Decks does. Absolutely. 100%. Calvin Bowes goes on and says, I bet you would get better Star Trek if Braxton was the showrunner. He understands what Star Trek is better than the guys who do it now. Well, the thing is, it's what you have to understand, the people that are doing Star Trek now want to change. They're changing what Star Trek is. And that's the thing. That's the different thing. Max Relax is a new imagination connoisseur. I love that. Max Relax. Hello, Max Relax. It's so wild when this new membership thing throws me off because people's names come up with color. I'm like, ooh. Justin Tonner is here. Justin Tonner says, Rob, Scream Factory is having a Shocktober sale on their website. 50% off select Blu-rays. It ends October 19th. I ordered The Howling, The Fog, Prince of Darkness, RoboCop 2, Halloween 3, John Carpenter's Vampires, and Night of the Creeps, all 50% off. Justin, I know you're a good imagination connoisseur, and I really do appreciate that. But you know what I don't see in this list of movies that you ordered from Scream Factory? Where's your Hills Run Red Blu-ray? Why didn't you order the Hills Run Red Blu-ray? A movie that I produced and spent all of that time this year during COVID making special features for 6.5 hours of special features. Go back to Scream Factory and you order the Hills Run Red. You show me that you got it. I want proof of life. Brandon Plummer became a member, and so did Med6814. Well, thank you both. Alexander Wilson goes on to say, Gilligan said that he wanted the character Mike's cell phone ring to be the Next Generation theme. He talked to the rights holders, and they wanted crazy money for a 10-second soundbite. He had to drop it because it wouldn't be fiscally responsible. I know. Look, you know what? It is Jerry Goldsmith's theme, and I understand that, but like you said, it ain't show Friends. It's show business. Stubble McShave said, I missed one of your tips. Oh, did I? I apologize. It's been a raucous show. Let me find out where that went. Where did that go? Oh, Stubble McShave said, I like a rant or two, but Star Trek rants that last over an hour is not fun. That was reflected in the chat where many left. Yeah, but there's 376 people here now. No, you're probably right. I mean, it's not like I rant all the time about Star Trek. I have held my tongue and not talked about Star Trek Discovery. But I understand what you're saying, Stubble. Simon goes on to say, Star Trek the original series, TNG, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine showed sci-fi stories that examine current world situations in a sci-fi universe. Absolutely. Star Trek Lower Decks, you were right on the money about the humor in which the main character is a Mary Sue created in the same image of Burnham, unreal and unlikable. Eric Gant says that Tag and Bink... by the way, I agree with you, Simon. I agree. Eric Gant sends in a super chat and says, Tag and Bink is awesome. R.I.P. Mandy Bothans. He died to bring us this information. I'm glad I got to read that while Kevin was actually on the phone. I'm a huge fan of horror, says Billy Joe Ray Bob Throg. Throg, I got something to tell you. So check this out. So yesterday, a big box comes in the mail from Amazon. And Elizabeth is like, you're nuts. Money's tight. What are you ordering? What's in this box? I'm like, I didn't do it, man. I didn't order anything. I don't know what it is. So we open up the box, and there's this Santa bag, like a big bag, a Santa bag with a bow on it. It's a bow on it. I'm like, what is this? And like, we're all Elizabeth and me and Sophie and Zoe are like, what's in that box? What is that? And so I open up the Santa thing, like, we don't know what it is. Our man Throg, who's an imagination connoisseur from the East Coast, heard me mention that Throg helped us when there was a toilet paper shortage at the beginning of lockdown. You couldn't get any paper products here, and Throg hooked us up. And I made a crack about running out of toilet paper again. And Throg hooked us up in this beautiful box, in this beautiful Santa bag with this gold bow on it. And then I opened up the gift card. So, Billy Joe, Ray Bob Throg, thank you. Once again, I can honestly say for at least the time being, my bungholio will be cleanolio because you have once again gifted us. I mean, if there's nothing else, when I think about I never thought that I would ever be in a place in my life where I would actually be thanking somebody profusely for sending us large quantities of toilet paper. And maybe that might be my fondest memory of all of 2020. So anyway, I want to thank you for that. Billy Joe Ray Throg says, I'm a huge fan of horror. I also know what I might think works is a failure in someone else's eyes. Reboots, Evil Dead did it right. Yeah. Halloween did it better than Rob Zombie. Kevin Rubio said it best. Play it straight. I add respect to the original material. Well, Throg, you're down on it. Corona and lime for me, please. You must have heard that Kevin's... I hope he gets some whiskey. Simon became a member. Thank you, Simon. Robert April sends in a tip and says, the ones who accuse folks of gatekeeping are the actual gatekeepers. It's true. Us old-timers want more fans. But there are some guidelines, kids. Therein lies the debate. And if you don't like debate, you don't know Trekkies very well, do you? No. Max Relax became a member, which I already said that, but it just popped up here. Thank you, Max Relax. Alexander Wilson sent in a tip. Thank you, Alexander. Forgive me for that first chat's grammar. I'm drunk right now. It sounded so bad when you were reading it. Also, I think the first Creed was far superior to Creed 2. I do too. Is Coogler a better storyteller of Stallone's universe than Stallone himself? Well, I think they have different sensibilities. I think I think Ryan Coogler as a fan, and also who transfers over and becomes a professional, I think Coogler, Stallone will never understand what it's like to be an audience member that's inspired by his work, because people who make you can't ever be in that position. and you understand what you want, but you'll never get what the viewer is getting out of it. I think Ryan Coogler, to me, when people talk about who are the biggest fans of something, like people, who are your favorite fans? You have Uber fans. I'm like, my favorite fan, I'll tell you this, I'll flat out say this, my favorite fan of anything ever that turned around and became professional is Ryan Coogler because of Creed. Now, people are like, well, Rob, don't you think you're giving Creed too much credit? And I'm like, no, because for me, it's the perfect example of somebody, and I want to say I heard it on Elvis Mitchell's The Business, his NPR show, and I think it was on that show when he had Ryan Coogler on, and Ryan Coogler told the story of, like, his mother had cancer. I don't know if his mother passed away or not. If she did, I'm very sorry to hear that, but Ryan Coogler was talking about how he and his dad would watch Rocky movies over and over again to make themselves feel better because of what his mom was going through. And it was because of that experience that he wrote, he wanted to make Creed. And I'm like, man, that guy nailed it, because he wanted to make he made a Rocky movie for the right reasons, and he was able to imbue it with the great kind of, I mean, everything that you would glean from, say, the first Rocky, or even, say, Rocky 2, or actually the franchise as a whole, he was able to imbue in his story. And not only did he tell a great story about Rocky Balboa canonically, like, can you imagine if you got the Creed version, if Picard, what Ryan Coogler did for Creed, that you got that from somebody doing the Picard show? That's what I was hoping for. I'm like, oh my God, I really hope Picard is like Creed. And I was like, well, I was very disappointed. Very disappointed. But anyway, so I don't know, Alexander, better than Stallone himself, because you still need Stallone to make Creed. But, I mean, you still need Stallone to make Rocky. Rob Altus became a member. Why, thank you, sir. Philip Alvarez said, I ordered The Hills Run Red, Rob, from the same sale. Also, The Fly Collection, Darkman, Curse of the Werewolf, and Night of the Creeps. Nice list. Well, everyone, as you know, Kevin Rubio is coming to my house to discuss our animated project, which this is the presentation. No, I won't show it to you. But anyway, yes. So I'm going to bring an end to Robservations episode 533, and let me apologize to anybody who left the chat because they didn't want to hear my Star Trek rant. I apologize. I hope you come back tomorrow with part 3, the end of my Star Trek trilogy, where I promise to talk about hope, about what I love about Star Trek. Tomorrow is not a rant about what I don't like about Star Trek. Tomorrow is me talking about what I love about Star Trek, what's happening in Star Trek right now that continues to fuel my love and interest of the franchise. And I promise you it will be... However, Captain Robert April's material will be read. So, yes, indeed. And we'll talk about that, too. But it's going to be positive, I promise. First of all, I want to thank all of my moderators. Let me talk about Mike Bodden and Greg Smith and the Richard. Robert Pariso is here. Let's see. Greg Smith is here. I already said Greg Smith's name, but I don't know who else is here. It's been a long chat. But I want to thank you all for participating and being great moderators, making the community what it is. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel. Becoming the membership thing has been fun, and I promise that we're going to be doing some extra added stuff. But remember, it's free to all. You don't have to be a member. We are having a Robservations, Eliza Views Halloween Zoom party on the 24th of October after the show, probably at 4. But you have to wear a costume. You only have to wear this. Like Greg Smith can put on his Boba Fett helmet, he gets in. Or his Rebel Force Awakens Rebel flight fatigues. He gets in. That's all you have to do. And you get in. We're going to have a live Zoom party, which should be a lot of fun. Our Zoom parties are a lot of fun. And we're doing it again. And by the way, it was suggested by Candida, who is the first couple of the Burnettwork. Claude and Candida is our official couple. We have different official things. We have official things on the channel. Like Julius Goodwin is the official sommelier of the Burnettwork. Claude and Candida are our official couple. Mark C, is the official Toxic fan. Yes, we have our official Toxic fan. Kaz Graphics is, in fact, our cheesemonger. We keep adding to it. Unfortunately, John's father, Carmelo, passed away. He was the official father of the channel. So I keep thinking about him because I have these pictures that I got from John of his father. But yes, we have these crazy things. We're going to keep adding to that. So there you go. I guess B.L. Alley would be the official novelist of our channel. That would be good. And by the way, I'm thinking about B.L. Alley. He has a film called The Trip you should watch. And, of course, Dieter Bastian and Patrick Keller have given me a new version of their film, The Secret Exchange 2, Broken Promises, that they've cleaned up the sound a bit. So watch for that. I'm going to repost their movie with better sound. So there is that. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, kind souls, gentle beings from across the 28 known galaxies, however you identify, you are welcome here in the Post-Geek Singularity community. My only rule is that you treat everybody else with respect, because you're all welcome here. Of all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, political persuasions, however, you're welcome. I will be back tomorrow. I do not know yet, because Elizabeth is working, if we're going to do, we might move Whining About Movies to tomorrow. So we'll be doing a Sunday night show and a Monday night show. So the Autopsy of Jane Doe is part of our Halloween horror film celebration. I think we'll push it to tomorrow on Sunday. But we might be able, because of that, we might do it earlier. So maybe we'll start at 6. I think that might be better. Anyway, thank you all for being here. And thank you for supporting the channel via Super Chats, tips, and, of course, also the new memberships, which are fun. We're going to add new... It's just wacky. And you can become a member for 99 cents a month. So there you go. Join the wacky fun. You can have an emoji of me. Anyway, thank you all for being here. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say, live long and prosper. See you tomorrow for the last of my Star Trek rants. Oh, wait. Star Trek Discovery Season 3 debuts next week.